Hello and welcome to the Weekly Stuff podcast with Jonathan Lack
and Sean Chapman.
We are here to talk about stuff. This week on the show, it is part 3 of our Weekly Suit Gundam 3rd year anniversary extravaganza, where we are talking about all the Gundams and ranking all the Gundams. We just recorded this monster podcast. It's very big. It is all the Gundam rankings you could ever hope to find in one podcast, and I am very tired.
Yes. Jonathan, you made the very smart choice of, you were like, let's record the Weekly Suit Gundam part first, because we made like 15 lists for that podcast, and then we'll see how much space there is to do a weekly stuff segment. Turns out there's not that much space, and there's not a lot of energy left in the tank.
Not a lot of energy left in the tank. We will do a fuller Weekly Stuff episode next week, and you will hear more from us then. For now, this is just a little intro to the Gundam podcast. If you don't listen to our Gundam stuff, Godspeed, but I will say if you do listen to our Gundam stuff, this is one of my favorites ever. It's very fun.
Yeah, this is a really fun big podcast. There's also a big announcement at the end of it in terms of where we're going in the future of Weekly Suit Gundam, since obviously we were kind of ran out of road at the end of Gundam because we caught up. So we'll have an announcement there. Obviously, we'll continue to talk about the future of that podcast past this point. I'll give people a little window into maybe what I'll talk about next week on the Weekly Stuff. Is I have continued on my Resident Evil binge. And since the last podcast, I did finish a one playthrough of Remake, and then I did a Chris playthrough of Remake, and then I last night finished a Leon playthrough of Resident Evil 2 Remake. So I have been deep in the Resident Evil mind. So I'll probably be done with Resident Evil 3 because I'm about to do a Claire playthrough of 2. So I'll have a lot of Resident Evil to talk about next week if people want to hear it.
Sounds good. We'll see you then. Enjoy the Gundam talk.
Enjoy the Gundam. Hello and welcome to Weekly Suit Gundam, the special bonus podcast brought to you by the folks at the Weekly Stuff podcast. I am Sean Chapman.
And I'm Jonathan Lack.
And we are here once again to dive into the wild and wacky world of Gundam with our 3rd year anniversary and the 3rd podcast for our 3rd year anniversary, our big birthday spectacular here at the Weekly Suit Gundam. We have gone through a whole lot of lists so far, doing all the shows, and we've done all the music stuff. But for today's episode, this is what we've labeled the party episode on the outline, where we have an ungodly number of lists and rankings and topics and things to discuss, including mobile suits and characters, and updating those lists from our previous episodes. But there's just also a kind of grab bag of nonsense, a lot of it suggested by viewers, that we get to talk about on today's episode.
Yes, absolutely. It's a ton of... we got the big list of mobile suits and characters, which we've done in past years. Then we get into the crazy stuff, and it gets crazier as it goes along, and really still only scratching the surface. There's so many stupid lists you could make from Gundam, but this alone was exhausting enough, because it took a lot of work to put these lists together, let me tell you.
Yeah, there was a point where it felt like I was basically taking like a Gundam test or something, with how much it was like having to dive into like my knowledge of all the things that we have watched and all the things we've talked about to try to make like lists on all these weird fucking topics that people sent in, which was very fun, but it was also like, it was a shocking amount of work when I actually started doing it. It took me like several days just to like create the preliminary lists for everything, let alone actually like narrowing down exactly what my like ultimate picks would be.
Yeah, I think that's a good way to put it, but I think it will be an exciting one. Now that we've seen most of the Gundam, we have a lot to rank, and so this is going to be a very fun one. And stick around to the end, because we've got big announcements coming for what is next on Weekly Suit Gundam and beyond.
Yes, because this is, of course, our 3rd year anniversary, but it is also us reaching more or less, with the exception of a movie that has come out over the course of us recording these podcasts for the 3rd year anniversary. We're basically at the end of the normal life of Weekly Suit Gundam, so we'll have announcements about what the future of this podcast looks like at the end of this episode.
Yes. But Sean, we have a lot to get to, so should we just dive right in with the mobile suits?
Yes, let's go ahead and do the mobile suits. So we have, like we've done in years past, we have a Season 3 mobile suits list, so we can recognize all the cool designs and stuff from this year of the show. So of like all the stuff we've covered in year 3, but then we also have For me, I say it's an updated top 10 mobile suits list of all time. Like, it's basically the same list with, like, one adjustment for me, but I already knew that going in because I knew what my top 10 mobile suits had been for a while, and it just happened to be older stuff. But there were lots of great mobile suits in this year of the show, including one that is on my top 10 list. It's just a weird sort of adjustment of something from the past on my list.
Yeah, definitely a tough one, because this is, just to remind people, Season 3 of Weekly Suit Gundam started with Hathaway's Flash, then went to Gundam Age, had all the Build Fighters and Build Divers shows, had G-Reco and Iron-Blooded Orphans, the Origin, Thunderbolt, Twilight Axis, all of that, so a lot to rank. And for my overall list, Sean, you're in a different position, because when you started doing this, you'd seen all the Gundams, so you had a pretty good sense of what your favorites were. Mine's changed a lot year by year, and I really threw out my old list and started over this time. And I'm very happy with my top 10, but it took a lot of work to get there.
Yes, I have had my settled top 10 forever, since before we did Weekly Suit Gundam, because that's part of my top 10 was when I was, getting all my Gunpla kind of stuff I was doing, was kind of just working through a bunch of the stuff on that list.
Yeah.
But let's start with our Season 3 suits and look at all the crazy stuff this year. Because as you said, this year specifically includes all the Build Fighters and Build Divers stuff, which is just a ridiculous number of mobile suits to have to work through, and bringing up all the designs to look at. It's crazy how many good designs there are of all the kind of remixes. And I had to work hard not to overload the list with too much stuff from there, because there's lots of other good stuff from the other shows we've watched. But it would be extremely easy to fill up the entire list just with Build Fighters and Build Divers stuff, because it's just taking greatest hits from other shows and putting cool different takes on them.
If I'm counting right here, I think 6 of my 10 are from the various Build shows, and there's at least one from all 4 Build shows. And then there's ones from other things we've watched too. But yeah, there was a lot.
Yeah, I have 6 on my list also that are from either the Build Fighters or the Build Divers. Yes, there's a lot.
Can I kick us off with a absolute classic Build Fighters?
Okay, go ahead.
My number 10 is the Kuma 03 Bear Guy San. The Bear Guy 3, the beloved Bear Guy. There's all sorts of Bear Guy variants I could have picked here as well, including the original Bear Guy in the Build Fighters Beginning G, which is wonderful. There's the Bear Guy that the character uses in Re-Rise, that is the Justice Bear Guy.
Uh-huh.
That's a great
Just
one.
a guy.
Yeah, the Just a Guy. But I am just going with the original yellow Bear Guy 3, big bow. It's wonderful. It's perfect. It had to be on the list.
Yeah, I'll say Bear Guy San is on my list as well. He's a little bit higher up, but yes, Bear Guy San has to be on the list.
Yes,
somewhere.
You heard it here. Bear Guy San is Sean's number 1 for this year.
You might be surprised. We'll see. We'll see how high up Bear Guy gets. My number 10 then, very different from Bear Guy San, is from G-Reco, is the Cams-05 Mac Knife. This is Mask's mobile suit. It's one of my favorite. I've always really loved the Mac Knife. It's always been very reminiscent of the Flag from 00, but it's got that very kind of lanky, cool design. But the thing I love about the Mac Knife is it just is a rare mobile suit design this deep into the lifespan of the Gundam franchise that just does stuff that's very surprising and different. The weird legs, which I think is where it gets the knife part of its name from, which are just big, long, flat panels on ball and socket joints at the hip, are so cool and weird, and it leads to a bunch of really interesting fights and animation in the actual show, because the design of the mobile suit itself is unusual, while not being so strange as being unrecognizable as a mobile suit. It's still got a very kind of Gundam enemy mobile suit feel to it, but kind of breaking a lot of the standard mold of those designs. So I've always really loved the Mac Knife, and I was happy to find a good spot for it on my list.
Yes, I did not have the Mac Knife on my list. I love the Mac Knife. I have a couple of different G-Reco things on here. Mac Knife is wonderful. I'm glad it's on yours.
Yes.
My number 9 is the Saikyo Kido Gundam Tryon 3 from Gundam Build Fighters Try. The best thing from Gundam Build Fighters Try, I hope we can all agree, was the Gundam Tryon 3, from the best character in Try. And I love it. It is basically a Super Sentai robot that combines and does crazy things. The best episode of Gundam Build Fighters Try is built around this thing. It's absolutely nuts. I would love to build it one day. It really embraces those bold colors. It's got a big lion on the chest. It's great. It's the Gundam Tryon 3. Definitely the thing we praised most about Build Fighters Try.
Yeah, the Tryon 3 didn't make my list. It was definitely on the list of things I considered. It is the best part of that show. It is by far the funniest joke in Build Fighters Try is the introduction of the Tryon 3. But I do think that, like, there is something true, though, also to the, like, it's like heresy or something. It's the super robot one. And so, you know, I think my design aesthetics and my personal preference leans so much more towards the real robot stuff in that way that it kept it slightly from being on the list. There was an earlier version of the list where that was my number 10, and then I was like, oh wait, no, the Mac knife, and I put the Mac knife there. But Tryon 3 is great.
Fair enough. What's your number 9?
All right, my number 9 from Build Divers Re-Rise, but also kind of from Gundam Age. It is the Age Tri-Mag Gundam Tri-Age Magnum. One of the most fun ones to say the entire name of the mobile suit, the Age Tri-Mag Gundam Tri-Age Magnum. So this is, what's his name? Kyoya's suit that he has in Re-Rise. That's obviously a kind of rejiggered version of the Gundam Age 1 with like a bunch of weird sort of all the different armaments the Gundam Age 1 has. It's got a bunch of that. It's got like kind of the double bullet looking thing. It's a pretty massive redesign of the Gundam Age Gundam look while retaining a lot of like the general aesthetic of the main Gundam Age Gundam. And so this was a fun one on my list because it's kind of, it stands in for the Gundam Age mainline Gundams also because it's the only one of the mainline Gundam Age Gundams that's on my list. While also being kind of a Build Divers rep on the list. But it's just a great design. I love the navy blue and yellow highlights. Like, that's always a really good colored scheme for Gundams. It's got a little bit kind of like the Gundam Mark II kind of brought that really darker blue in. And this makes really great use of that. I really wish the Tri-Age Magnum was used a lot more on the show. Like, I kind of wish this was just the one that character had in the original Build Divers, because his one in the original Build Divers is a fine version of the Gundam Age 2, but the Magnum one is just awesome, but it's only in for a little bit in Re-Rise. But it's a cool mobile suit. And I know this is one, Jonathan, that you have the Gunpla kit of, and this is one I would really love to make the Gunpla kit, because it just seems super awesome.
My number 8 is the Age Tri-Mag Gundam Tri-Age Magnum. So I agree. It's my number 8. I had it one higher than you. And yes, and honestly, I think the only thing that holds me back from putting it higher is just that it isn't used in the show more. Like, I do think I like it just as a, like, because I have this and my number 7. I have the Gunpla of both, and I've built them. I like the Tri-Age Magnum more as a mobile suit, as a design. The other one, though, is better in story and animation, and I am taking that into account as well. But yes, if you just want to buy a good high-grade kit, I think that is the best of the high-grade kits I've ever bought. In part because it comes with a stand, so that's just nice. You don't have to go buy a stand for it. And it's so fun. You kind of have to put it on the stand because it's so big. It has this enormous sword. I love the color scheme of it. And for me, Sean, I'm doing the exact same thing you did, where this is both for Build Divers Re-Rise, but it is also standing in for Gundam Age just in general. And because I do like the Gundam Age aesthetic an awful lot, but I think the one suit that does it best is the Tri-Age Magnum. It's just a really good refinement, combination of a lot of things I like in Age, with a color scheme I really, really like. That navy blue is just fantastic. And yeah, it's a if you want a good HG kit, that is one of the best I've ever built, and I love it.
Yeah, it feels like design-wise, they just kind of took all the cool bits of the 3 different Gundam Age like the main variants, the 1, 2, and 3, with the one having the Sparrow attachments, I think is what it was called, like the knife one. And it just feels like it kind of takes bits and pieces from all of those and puts it together into one design, which I think is like kind of like the intent of the Tri-Age kind of name there. Yeah, it's a really awesome kind of refinement of what the Gundam Age Gundam looked like.
I love it's got the 4 sort of like beams on its shoulders, so it's got 2 left, right, and front, back, and like all of that when you build it together and the way you can pose it, it's a super cool suit. I love the color design. I love it's got orange in there as well. It's just great. And it also in the show does that really cool thing with like the what's its special attack? It's almost like it's doing a roulette, right?
Yes, because it's the Gundam Age like arcade card game that was in Japan.
Yes.
He builds that system in, which again was like it's such a good idea. It's a shame that that wasn't used in the show where that character is actually heavily featured, because it's only in like one brief moment in Re-Rise.
Then again, it would have been used in service of trying to kill a small child, so maybe that's for the best.
That is a fair point.
What's your number 8?
All right, my number 8. I love this. Is such a weird fucking mobile suit, but I love it. It's the XVM-FZC, another Gundam Age suit. Is the Gundam Legolas, which is the Gundam that the Mars people build in Gundam Age in like Part 3. I'm using the mainline color scheme, which is the sort of classic Gundam color scheme, but also the Zehart one, which is the red one. Is great. Like, those are both, I can't kind of pick my favorite between the two color schemes because they're both fucking awesome. But I love this. It's such a like bizarre looking Gundam because it takes all the like weird alien dragon kind of stuff that the Martians have in Gundam Age and implements it with classic Gundam design. So it's got all these like harsh edges. It's got this very sort of like strange face that it doesn't really have the kind of human looking face of the Gundam anymore. And so it looks more alien and far more angular. There's a lot of really great stuff in Gundam Age with animation around this and with the Zehart variant of it. And it's just a cool, weird looking Gundam. And it's something that like, you know, you get very accustomed to the handful of kinds of Gundam designs that you see in the shows, whether it's like the standard Gundam, it's like the lanky Gundam, it's the big buff, bulky Gundam, that kind of stuff. And this doesn't fit into any of those design archetypes. This kind of is very much its own thing, while still very much evoking what you recognize from Gundam designs. And so that kind of uncanny quality of it works really well for the show, and also I think just really works really well from a raw design perspective.
Not on my list, but I do love it. It was definitely in my runners-up, and this is one where I actually do prefer the standard one, even though I am a red mobile suit guy. I think the Zehart one looks good. I think Zehart has better suits in the show, and I think there's something about the balance of white to yellow and blue in the main design that I really, really love. It actually evokes the F91 in a lot of ways, I think, in that it is sleeker and smaller, a little more angular. That chest piece is very F91, and all of the like little three-pronged sort of yellow things are kind of sticking out on it. It's a great suit. I'm glad it's on your list. It's a very cool one.
Yeah, I really love, like, it has a lot more prominent gold highlights is one of the things I think, like, works really well with the design of it. Yeah, it's an awesome design. I would love to make a Gunpla kit of that one day because it's very cool.
My number 7 is the ASWG-08 Gundam Barbados from Iron Blooded Orphans. Just a kick-ass suit. On its own, just kind of holding like the Gunpla in my hand, it's not necessarily one of my absolute favorites just looking at it that way. It really all comes down to how it is used in the show, I think it's fair to say. Because the way the Barbados just really, I think, exemplifies the entire kind of ethos around mobile suit design in Iron Blooded Orphans, with what we have talked about on that show of it being kind of like knights in armor in the Middle Ages. Not in the like cool heroic way that is sometimes like mythologized, but in the way they kill each other is they get a big hammer and cave the armor plate in. And the absolute best thing about the Barbados is that its main weapon is just this big fucking metal rod, like hammer bat thing that it carries around, and it leads to some of the coolest fights in all of Gundam. I also love particularly the earlier versions of it, because it gets some upgrades over the course of the show, but the initial version is so kind of sinewy and thin, and it's got like a lot of like uncovered parts where you can see beneath it and kind of see the skeleton of it, and I really love that. It's like a little kind of like hint of Eva design in there a little bit, in kind of the sinewyiness of it, and I love that about it as well. It's an outstanding suit. It's a fun build. I like this one a lot.
I will say that is somewhere on a little bit higher on my list as well. So
yeah,
I'll talk about it there. Yes, great suit. All right, my number 7. This is my SD Gundam rep on this list. I only found space to fit one SD Gundam, but it's the only so far. You know, we haven't had space for SD Gundam anywhere else. So my favorite of the SD Gundams that we've seen in the build shows is the RX-0 or RX-Ray, depending on how you want to pronounce the kanji. RX-0 Maru. This is Ayame, the ninja girl from Gundam Build Divers. This is her SD Gundam, and it's just a sick fucking weird ninja, little tiny ninja man that can transform. I really love all of the SD Gundams, and Buildfire's Try is what starts introducing them. So Try, Divers, and Re-Rise. It was kind of hard for me to pick my favorite when I was like building the list. It was clear that there was only kind of space for one. So Zero Maru is kind of standing in for all of them. But there's something about the design. I don't know. It kind of... It uses to its advantage, I think, the things that SD Gundam can do by being more exotic with the ornamentation, by having like all the like crazy Ninja Gaiden looking kind of headpiece and all that kind of ornamentation on it that really makes the Zero Maru stand out to me. It's like Build Divers is a show that obviously I do not like that much, but IMA and the Zero Maru, when in the couple of points in the show where they use it like well, is like one of the few glimmers that show has of like, oh, this character is cool and this mobile suit is cool and she's doing cool stuff. And unfortunately, that character gets totally sidelined in the second half of the show. But there's like this brief shining moment near the end of the first core where IMA and her Zero Maru Ninja are awesome and like kind of hold that show up for a little while. Is a like, kind of bright spot in a very dark, like unpleasant show to watch. So the Zero Maru is my number 7.
It's on mine. It's a little higher. We'll hear about it soon. My number 6 is the XMX9999 Crossbone Gundam Mao from Gundam Build Fighters. This is Mao, my favorite character from the Build franchise. His mobile suit, one of his mini ones, but his are all sort of Crossbone and After War Gundam X themed, and this is the best of them. It's such a cool design. It's basically a Crossbone Gundam mixed with the Gundam X, and so it's got the big, piece on the back that is both the sort of the core fighter thing that you get in the Crossbone Gundam, and then it also captures the energy from the moon. It's got a really big, crazy skull on the front, crazier than anything in the original Crossbone Gundam. And then this really great gray and purple color scheme, where it's not white, it's this gray kind of beige, and then it's got purple and violet highlights all over it, addition to the yellow that you get on all Gundams. And it's just fantastic. It's one I would love to build one day. It might even be higher on here if I have the chance to build it at some point. It's one of my favorites in the sort of like Crossbone Gundam legacy, but also getting a couple pieces of the X in there. It's fantastic. I love it.
Yeah, it did not quite make my list, but it was like in the running. It was like one of those of where, as I said at the top of this discussion, like it would be so easy to just flood this entire list with just build suits, and that's like a good example of both of Mao's. His like Double X Gundam and his Crossbone Gundam variants are both so fucking awesome.
They're great, and I felt comfortable putting this one on, especially because Crossbone Gundam hasn't had an anime, so we haven't had a chance to like put it on a list, really. The other one that I could have done this year, of course, is in Gundam Age. You have the Dark Hound, and that one is fantastic. But I wound up going with, I like this one even more, because I think there's something about that gray and purple that is really fantastic, and actually captures, I think, some of the coloring in the Crossbone Gundam manga that if they ever do make an anime would be a real joy to see. It doesn't, those mobile suits don't quite look like what you expect, and that's part of what's great about it.
Very true. Well, my number 6 is a different suit from the original Gundam Build Fighters. Mine is the XXXG-01WF, the Wing Gundam Fenice. This is the original version of the Wing Gundam Fenice. Which I like the upgraded versions, but the original to me is the best because the original Wing Gundam Fenice has the whole backstory that you learn that informs its design, that it's the one that Ricardo has been fighting with since he was like a kid or whatever, and he just keeps on repairing it, and so instead of ever making a new Gundam, he just keeps on repairing the same Gunpla. So it's got this like really cool asymmetrical look where some of the pieces of it have clearly like kind of fallen off or been replaced with other chunks. And so one side of it has like a lot of like the full armor and has like all the kind of like green extra pieces of armor, and the other side of it is very sparse. He's moved the wings of the Wing Gundam over to one side, so it's got this weird like kind of asymmetrical wing that's almost more like, looks like a cloak or something, like an Italian like Duke's cloak or something like that, that's only on one shoulder. And then the face also is awesome. It's got the kind of heterochromia-esque eye lenses that are two different colors, and then one of the V's is cut off, and so one of the V's is short on its like head crest. So it's just got this very kind of cool, very personal design that I think so much evokes the character. Of course, it's got all like the Italian flag colors of green, yellow, and red really well represented, and it's like they're really good shades of all of those. colors that makes it stand out. I like that the white is this very kind of ashy white color that contrasts well with the very kind of like olive green that they go with. It's just like the Wing Gundam is always a really cool design. It's one of my favorites. And this is I think, one of the coolest remixes of any existing Gundam suit in Gundam Build Fighters, because it doesn't stray from the fundamentals that far from the Wing Gundam design. It more moves pieces around a little bit and kind of reorganizes things that already exist on the Wing Gundam, but it isn't kind of inventing large chunks of design to put on there. So it's like a really smart, elegant remix and redesign of a really great suit.
It's fantastic. I very much considered including it, and then I remembered, Sean, I know how much you loved it, and I'm like, this will be on Sean's. I'm okay leaving it off mine and doing my Crossbone Gundam Mao, because that's where my heart really lies. But the Wing Gundam Fenice is phenomenal. I will not disagree with anything you said. It's fantastic. So,
yeah, I think it's very appropriate that those are the two suits that sit exactly where they are on this list. Because it just like it very cuts to like our specific preferences on either side of that line.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so my number 5, getting into the top 5, is the Deep Breath MSAM 034A Space Yanaham Space Type Klim Nick Use from G-Reco. This is Klim Nick's big blue suit. It is a big, beautiful blue boy. It is all blue, and it is very bulky, but in that very unique G-Reco way, where it is big and bulky, but it is very rounded, and it's got all these like soft, round corners. It's the thing I love about G-Reco's designs that actually makes it very hard to create them in Gunpla, from what I've seen, is that they have this very animated quality to them, and I really love this on the Yanaham. There are other variants of it, but the one that Klimnik has that is blue is my favorite. The shading of blue, I mean, the color work in G-Reco in general is one of my favorite things about it, but on all of the mobile suits, there's such great color work. This one is, you've got this main shade of kind of like almost like a Klein blue or something, and then it's darker in some places, lighter in others. The feet are this very, very dark navy blue, and then the eyepiece goes with that kind of thing that you also get on the G-Self and some of the other suits, where it's this kind of almost like bug insect kind of eyes, and it's red. And I think that the headpiece is so striking. You've got the big red eyes, you've got the sort of blue helmet around it that kind of almost looks like a Spartan 5 helmet from Halo, and then you've got kind of like Char's original mobile suit, the little horn on it, but it's a little more of like a little horn flag. And it just, I think it's a great, representation of Klim Nick's entire wonderful personality. I love the shield that it has. This one is just, I know I get flagged as the red mobile suit guy. I also think of myself as the blue mobile suit guy. I really like blue mobile suits, and this one is one of the best in the franchise.
Yeah, it did not quite make my list, but I'm glad that it's on yours. This is one where like the Mac Knife edged over it as the the sort of like enemy or like sort of like standard mobile suit from G-Reco on my list.
And, I think it does something, the Mac Knife is a more radically different mobile suit, but one of the things I love about this one is that it clearly takes the place of, like, a Goof or a, like, custom Zaku, and it's similar in a lot of ways, but when you look at it, it just kind of feels so unique and different. It's such a fun update of, what are, at this point, 40-year-old mobile suit designs, and there's something about that that's very striking, and I love about it.
Yeah, it's a great design. I mean, G-Reco has a bunch of really great designs.
Yes. This could have been an all G-Reco list, but yeah, there's want to spread the love around a little bit.
Yes. My number 5 then is the AMX-104GG, the R-Gyagya, Gyanko's original suit from Gundam Build Fighters Tri. I could have also considered the Gansalot, which is her suit from Tri Island Wars, which does have an amazing name, but I think the R-Gyagya overtakes it in the design department. This is a redesign of the R-Jaja, which is Kiara Soon's mobile suit from Double Zeta, and incorporating a lot of Yan design elements on it. And it's just such a fucking cool looking goddamn mobile suit. The R-Jaja originally has a red color scheme. It's a very much like one of those late period Neo Zeon mobile suits kind of leading up to the Sazabi design. And so it's got that like very kind of rounded, kind of harsh rounded look to it on a lot of its like curves and edges. And it's got the mono eye and all that kind of stuff. But this version, the R-Gyaga variant, has this cool kind of like silver and gold color design, silver with gold highlights. It's got 2 big Gyan-styled shields bolstered onto either a shoulder pad That's one of the main Gyan elements it adds on, which adds this cool, like, kind of bigger, bulkier profile to it. It's got a little Gyan-style beam saber that's kind of like the fencing saber thing that it's got. And then one of my favorite additions to the Argyagya, which always had this big kind of horn thing in the back of the head, and they've added this tall geese-esque sort of Roman crest on top that really kind of builds out the full profile of the mobile suit. And it's just, like, incredibly elegant. I think it's one of my favorite, like, late Neo-Zeon style mobile suit designs I've seen. I think the color design is extremely unique. And takes some of, I think, the concept of the Gyan as being like this kind of armored knight look, and really kind of brings it, I think, even more fully into fruition through the way that the Argyagya is designed. And then it also, of course, just has, like, an all-time great mobile suit name, taking the Argyagya and throwing Gyagya on it for your Gyan-themed character. Is amazing, and as much as I'm sort of, like, very meh on Gundam Build Fighters Try as a whole, it does have a bunch of really great mobile suits, and Gyanko is one of my favorite characters in that show. So I'm very happy that she also gets one of the coolest mobile suits that show has.
Sean, I have a confession.
Yeah.
I somehow overlooked this one, and I am now kicking myself. Would it be okay for me to do an on-the-fly adjustment of my list?
If it's to put the Argyagya on there, yes.
Okay, the Gundam Tryon 3 is getting kicked off for the reasoning you gave, which is that it's not really a Gundam suit, and that's the joke. I still love it. It's getting kicked off. So now my number 10 is the Bear Guy, and then everything is in the same place for a while. My number 9 is the Tri-Age Magnum, 8 Barbados, 7 Crossbone Gundam Mao, 6 is the Space Yanaham, and now we're on number 5? Right?
Yes.
Because you just gave your 6, right?
Yes, this is my number 5.
Oh, that's your number 5? My number 5... is the Argyagya is going really high on my list. So my number 5 is going to be the RX-0 Zero Maru, which you already talked about.
Yes.
The Zero Maru is wonderful. The Zero Maru is one I have. It's one of 2 SD Gundams I've built, both from this year. I also got the SD Gundam that I forget her name because it's Tri, but the main girl character in Tri has.
Fumina.
Fumina. It's hers, and I really like that one. That's a very simple one, but I do like it a lot. But the Zero Maru, I actually have to give that kit praise. That might be the single best Gunpla I've ever built. It is so cool when you put it all together. The amount of detail in it, the way all the stickers work together. It's a really intricate build, actually, for what is an SD Gundam that's kind of like in the kind of high-grade realm of quality. But you build the Zero Maru, then it's got the armed armor Hattori part, which is the bird that goes with it. Mm-hmm. And you build both of those separate. They're both great. And then you can take them apart and build the full-size mobile suit out of it and have basically an HG Gundam built out of that is also really cool. The real mode, basically. You can also put it in shinobi form or kakure form, where you have the like little eye shade over the eyes of the SD Gundam. And all of that combined with the color scheme, all of the red on it. It's like all this like kind of like shiny red. It is just one of the coolest things. I love the big headpiece that it has. That is like this big gold like helmet crown kind of thing. All of that is amazing. It looks great in animation. It is my single favorite thing in Build Divers. I mean, it is just a great suit. Very high on my list because, and honestly, got higher because I think the gunpla of it is just, they hit that one out of the fucking park, and I cannot recommend it highly enough. So it becomes my number 5.
Very nice. So it's a good suit.
And you gave your number 5, which means it's time for me to give my number 4. And then you do your 4.
Yes.
Okay. Because of this adjustment I did. My number 4 is the RX-78AL Atlas Gundam from Mobile Suit Gundam Thunderbolt. There's a lot that I could do from Thunderbolt here, although, to be fair, a lot of the best suits in Thunderbolt are basically updates of suits from original UC Gundam that they've done very good work on. Like the Psycho Zaku I love, but that's basically like sort of the Char Zaku design with just giant fucking tanks on the back and stuff like that, you know? And I love the entire design language of Thunderbolt. I think the Atlas Gundam is the clear standout because it's just so original on top of that, you know? It is a Gundam very, recognizably so, but then it does so many unique and cool things with it that are very unique, I think, to what makes Thunderbolt Gundam's design language so good. So it's got this really cool, color scheme with the white, yellow, and black. Kind of recalls the new Gundam in sort of its general color scheme. But then it's got because this is a wholly original Gundam, it really gets into, I think, the kind of minutia that Thunderbolt likes to get into, of having, like, the mesh padding around the joints, and having these very round kind of ball joints, which feel a little more realistic realistic of how something like this would operate in sort of three-dimensional space. It's got, the great helmet where we've got, the updated, four-horn design from something like the new Gundam. And then it's got those really cool, what do you call them, that it rides around on the skates,
I'm not sure what...
the legs, basically.
Them, but yeah,
like the big legs,
like pontoons almost that it has. Yeah,
pontoons is a good word. They're like pontoon legs that it can, because it can do so many things with them. It's like it's sort of like its core fighter that it can fly around on. It can go underwater with them. It can ride in the air on them. There is one phenomenal action sequence in the manga that is very cut down in the anime, where you have that character. Oh, God, I'm sorry, I'm forgetting character names today, but EO, yeah. You have EO Fleming in the Atlas Gundam jumping around from ship to ship looking for Carla when he... Not Carla, it's the other girl. Carla is the other guy's girl. What's his girl's name?
That I will not remember.
Okay, that's fine.
She's not in the anime that much. So.
She's not in the anime that much. Yeah. She's really important in the manga, and she gets cut out of the anime so far a lot, so I'm forgetting her name. But she is the girl that he was in love with, who was thought dead, and then they find out she is part of the Nanyang Alliance, and he's jumping from ship to ship trying to find her, and he's using the legs to do this. This is one of the coolest fight sequences in the manga. It's mostly excised out of the anime, but it's so cool, and it uses all the pieces of the Atlas Gundam. It's just an all-time great Gundam design, one of my favorites, and it looks cool as shit. What more to say? The Atlas Gundam kind of is the embodiment of what Thunderbolt does well in terms of mobile suit designs.
Yeah, I'll say that the Atlas Gundam is probably my number 11. Like, that was a hard cut for me. It's not quite on my list.
I thought it would be on yours. Interesting.
Yeah, I thought it would be too. And then I looked at all the mobile suits, and I'm like, well, fuck. And part of it is, like, I don't want to load the entire list with just Gundam, so I always try to make sure that I'm, like, considering the whole scope. And it ended up being like, well, I could put the Mac Knife on here or the Atlas Gundam, and I bought a bunch of really great Gundams on there already, and so the Mac Knife won out in that fight. But yes, Atlas Gundam is great. But did not quite make my list.
Yeah, so it's a really cool one.
Yeah. So my number 4 then is one you already talked about a bit, is the ASW-G-08 Gundam Barbados. I think I would go with the Gundam Barbados Lupus variant, which is the kind of mid variant. Either that or the original are the two best. Like, I like the Lupus Rex, which is the, like, really fucking crazy one that he has at the end. That is basically just a monster at that point and made to kind of look like the weird mobile armor kind of monsters that are in that universe. But the Barbados Lupus is the kind of midpoint where it looks like a full completed version of itself, with shoulder pads and all that kind of stuff, and all the kind of like the sinewy kind of like joints and cabling and stuff is not as exposed in the Lupus. But both the original and the Lupus are awesome. But yeah, the Barbados is just like a all-time great lead Gundam design. It is so different than your core Gundam. Like, it is, while still being very Gundam-ish, kind of like the Legolas in this way. It is really kind of looking at how far away can we get from the core design elements of a Gundam while still making it recognizably a Gundam, because this thing is pretty gnarly looking, right? And as it kind of grows and evolves over the course of the show, it gets more and more gnarly looking. But it is so harsh. It is so angular. It is such a scary looking thing. I love what they do with the V of the Barbados, that it's kind of like flat and extended past its head, giving it this sort of very aerodynamic look to it, rather than the V being sort of this big kind of icon or whatever. It kind of loses some of those elements that make the Gundam iconic looking, and move it into this space where it's like more sleek, and it feels incredibly efficient in how it's designed like designed to kill people, right? And it just looks purely like a weapon, in this very frightening way. Yeah, I like that it's, all of its stuff is named, the Barbados Lupus is like named after a wolf, and I think that's like a really appropriate way to look at the design, is it's incredibly predatory, and the way that the design evokes that feeling is something just so different for the Gundam franchise, and for a lead Gundam suit and the like iconic Gundam suit for that franchise to go so hard and be so intense in its design, I think is like awesome. And Iron Blood Orphans just gets so much incredible mileage out of how cool the suit looks. So many incredible shots over the course of that show, so many amazing fights. And as you say, Jonathan, like, one of the big appeals of the Barbados isn't just its design, but the design of its weapons. because it's the best one is the weird rod shooting like mace thing that he has. That's just a big metal stick he beats them with that also has like this pneumatic rod that shoots out this kind of like spike. I also love his big fucking slab of metal that he uses as a sword that Mika has to get used to over the course of the show and learn how to like attack strategically people's like enemy mobile suit joints. But the fact that the Barbados can't use really beam weapons and instead just has to use big sharp chunks of metal to beat or rip apart enemy mobile suits just so goes in with the whole aesthetic of Iron-Blooded Orphans and with the Barbados as a mobile suit. I don't think there are many Gundams that are as clear a like statement of intent for the show that they're a part of as what the Barbados is for Iron-Blooded Orphans.
I think that's a really good way to put it. The statement of intent thing is like very powerful with this one, and right from the beginning, because that's when you get in basically the first episode, big fight in the second, and it just really like. I was about to say plants a flag, and then that feels like I'm making a pun on the theme song of that show.
They raise their flag.
Yeah, but they do. That's kind of what this mobile suit does, so it's fitting. All right, so that was your number 4, which means it's time for my number 3. This one is kind of cheating, but kind of not. It is the PFF X7 Core Gundam from Build Divers Re-Rise. But that means this also includes the Earth 3 Gundam, the Mars 4 Gundam, the V2 Gundam, the Mercu 1 Gundam, the Jupitive Gundam, the Uraven Gundam, the Saturn Nyx Gundam, and the Nepdate Gundam. All of them together because this is one of the coolest ideas for a lead Gundam in the history of the Gundams. You have your basic little core Gundam that is like a kind of stripped down mini version almost of the Gundam Mark II. It just looks... I love that little core Gundam that he's got with the like kind of cool color scheme. And then you have all of these add-ons that come onto it in different forms and with different color schemes and with different powers over the course of the show. And it is one of the best pieces of characterization in Build Divers Re-Rise is just all of the things that the main character comes up with. You're constantly getting cool new lead Gundam designs that all have sort of the same basic design language. We praised this, up and down when we reviewed Gundam Build Divers Re-Rise. It's one of the many wonderful things about that show. I absolutely love this thing. It's hard to know. I couldn't, rip one of these out and rank them alone. They kind of all have to go together because the entire conceit is that it is one core Gundam that turns into all of these other things, and that is one of the coolest ideas we've ever had with a mobile suit.
Yeah, I'll say I didn't put this on my list because I was troubled by what to do with it, and the easy choice was to be I was 99% sure you were just going to put all of them on your list in one spot. I was like, well, Jonathan's going to do that, so I don't have to worry about it, and it makes my list easier, and I don't have to, argue with myself over, does this count as just one? Is it different mobile suits? Because, yes, the core Gundam is awesome in Re-Rise. It's an amazing idea, and the execution of it is amazing, and all of the different designs are so cool. And in some ways, I think even just the core Gundam in and of itself, just the full stripped down version is good enough, I think, to be considered in a top 10, even if
I agree
throughout all of its variants. Because of all of them, the stripped down core Gundam is actually my favorite of all of those. But it did make it hard for me to figure out what to do with it on my list. So I was like, well, whatever. There are so many good mobile suits. I'll let Jonathan deal with, and he can put the core Gundam on his, and then I'll make my list. But I think I'm glad that my prediction was correct and that you just threw it on your list, because the core Gundam is awesome and deserves a lot of accolades for Re-Rise because it's a great concept.
Yeah, and I love the core Gundam as well. I think the ones of the variants I would pick as my favorites is the Jupitive. I don't know, it's out of 5, so I guess it's Jupitive Gundam, which is the white one. That one looks super cool. It's mostly white with some bits of color on it. The Mars 4, which is your kick-ass red one, but also has some really nice white highlights. And then I think my favorite might be the V2 Gundam, which is a teal Gundam with white highlights. That is something we haven't quite seen before. It looks a little Gundam Age-esque. I really love that one. So, but you can't go wrong. This is a great Gundam.
It is a great Gundam. It is a great Gundam with lots of great Gundams as a part of it. Yeah.
Yes. That's my number 3.
All right, my number 3. We're in this top tier stuff. My number 3 is from G-Reco. It is the YG-111 Gundam G-Self. I'm kind of just putting it in here with with all the accoutrements, so you can consider this the perfect pack version, the base version, the atmospheric pack version. I like kind of all of them, and I wouldn't really pick one of the kind of variants of it as my favorite because they're all just kind of throwing different pieces on top of it. But the G Self is fucking amazing. Kind of like as a follow-up to the Turn A Gundam from Turn A Gundam. The G Self is following in that line of this latter period Tomino of really kind of saying, hey, what the fuck is a Gundam? Whatever. Like, let's just make it however we want it, and kind of be free to move away from the core design elements of it. Because in many ways, I would look at the G Self and be like, is that like how far it's moved from the core Gundam design? It's like it almost doesn't even look like a Gundam. It looks like something that looks like a Gundam, right? It has moved very, very far away from the core design elements in the same way that the Turn A Gundam does. But that is not a complaint. That is like a compliment, that it is able to, I think, embody the spirit of the Gundam design without doing that much that is specifically like it looks like a Gundam. I love the weird horns, right? That is basically meant to evoke the Gundam V, but is so not the Gundam V. Like in the actual, like the design execution, it has these two huge horns on its head. That is very iconic. It has the bug-like eyes, as you said, Jonathan, that a lot of the G-Reco suits have. That's amazing. But a huge part of what I love about it is the whole G-Reco aesthetic that is sort of like effused through the G-Self, and I feel like the G-Self kind of defines with its really gorgeous pastel color palette, the shades of blue that they use for the suit and its highlights, and the red and the gold and the white are so cool and look so unique in the world of Gundam. And it's something that I'm very glad that all the designs we've seen so far out of Witch from Mercury feel like they're taking a lot of cues from a lot of the design stuff that G-Reco does with things like the G-Self and some of what they do with the coloring, because it's just gorgeous on its own, but I think particularly when animated, it looks so good, and it is able to use digital animation to such an incredible degree. And yeah, it's just like, it's so cool. It's such a cool design. And it's one that like I really, really want to get a gunpla of, because it so breaks what you think a Gundam is supposed to look like, and yet also it sits in that kind of platonic space of representing a Gundam, even if a lot of the specific design elements are so different and so kind of cool. I love the G-Self to death, and it is my number 3.
It's a little higher on mine. You'll hear about it. My number 2 is the AMX 104 GGR Gaga, a mobile suit I totally didn't forget because I love it to death. It's a Gyan variant. How could I not? And of course, I took a deep look at all the Gyan variants before making my list. To be honest, Sean, I don't know how it happened that I missed this one. I think there are just so many from the Build Fighter series that something slipped through the cracks. Because I do remember looking at the other one you mentioned, the Gans a lot, and I do like that one a lot. That one is close enough to just a very minor Gyan variant that I didn't put it on the list. Even though it's got like a different weapon, it's got a little bit of a different helmet piece, but it's close enough that it didn't quite move the needle for me. The Gaga, I think what I love about it is that it's very clearly based on the Gyan. In particularly, I think its legs, in its shoulder pads, you can really recognize the Gyan elements there. The skirt it has is very Gyan-esque. But it does so many different things with it, like moving the shield to a shoulder piece and having 2 of them, and having that very much like Spartan kind of design on the helmet, which is so cool. And its beam sword looks so great. And it's got, instead of sort of the big shield, it's got the shoulder shields, and it's got these 2 things on the back that it uses as well. I think the color design of the gray and the gold is just sick as shit. Mm-hmm. And then I am also looking at pictures of the HG Gunpla of this one. And man, it is out of stock right now, but I'm going to have to keep an eye on that one, because that is one of the best looking HG Gunpla I have seen. I'm just kind of in awe of it looking at it right now. And given how much I love the Gyan, this needed to be at least number 2. So there it is for me. What a fucking suit. I think part of it, and maybe it should be lower because of this, but I don't care, it's so good, is that they don't use it enough. This is something we talked about with Try. Yeah. Gyanko should have been a main character throughout that whole show, and we should have had a lot more of the Gyan because it's so cool, and instead, just we only get it in like one episode, then she's gone. It's sad.
Yeah, it is such a tragically underused design. Yeah, but it was very funny when I put the Gaga on my list, and I said it when we were having the conversation like 10 minutes ago, and I said it, and then I saw in the feed, I saw your expression, and I saw this like look of horror in your face. It's like you realize, like, wait, what? Did I not? Oh God! And it was very funny. As soon as I said the name, I was like, oh my God, did Jonathan really not put this on his list? This was something I was like, sure. I was like, this might be Jonathan's number one for all I know, and clearly it's very close. So I thought it was very funny.
God, I worked so hard going through all the lists of fucking mobile suits this year. I was sure I hadn't missed any this year, but no, I missed it. And but luckily I fixed it. The Gaga, my number 2, I love it.
Yeah, it's a great suit. My number 2, one of the most iconic suits in the history of the franchise, is the Kuma 03 Bear Guy-san, or Bear Guy 3, however you want to say it. Had no mobile suit since the original Gundam in Zaku have revolutionized what we think of as Gundam as much as the Bear Guy has. And I do want to be specific that really properly the pronunciation of the name is not Bear Guy. He is not a Bear Guy. It is an Ak Guy variant, and so you should, if you want to say it properly, you have to put the glottal stop in there at the G. So it is technically Byaek Guy. So Byaek Guy-san. Fucking amazing. Like, just what an insane weird design, but like there is a reason why all the build shows like went crazy with Bear Guy, because it's just I think it captures the spirit of the Build Fighters thing, of where it's so dumb, it's so goofy, it's so corny, but it's so cool at the same time. It just captures like the goofy spirit of Build Fighters to a T. And it's like, it has become like legitimately an iconic part of the franchise since its inception. Like, obviously you have the original version of the Bear Guy that's in the OVA Builders Beginning G, but Bear Guy-san is obviously where they kind of actually refined the design and found the good midpoint between it being adorable and it being mechanical, because the original Bear Guy looks way too mechanical and is kind of terrifying. Like, it looks like it should be in like a Five Nights at Freddy's game and be murdering you, whereas the Bear Guy-san is adorable and looks like it should be your best friend. And yeah, it's just, I love it. I think it is such an incredibly iconic design. They use it so effectively in the show with like the stuffing that it has and all that stuff in episode 8 of Gundam Build Fighters, and that fight and how all that is utilized. It's got the like panel for its face that is able to show different expressions and stuff like that. Incredibly creative, innovative design, and it is, I'm not doing this in any way that's ironic. Like, I legitimately think it is one of the best designs. It was close to being my number 1, because I think of all the other designs, the Bear Guy-san has had the biggest influence on the franchise since it's come out compared to any of these other ones. But there is one other mobile suit from the set that I realized, well, no, this has to be my number 1. So it's not quite at the top of my list, but it's very, very close. And I think it is criminal, Jonathan, that it is as low on your list as it is.
I apologize to Bear Guy-san.
Thank you.
I asked for forgiveness. I actually don't know what your number 1 is. My number 1, though, I do know what it is. It would be weird if I didn't. My number 1 is the YG-111 Gundam G Self from G-Reco. When I looked into my heart of hearts, when I was making my overall top 10, it could only be this one. For all the reasons you said, Sean, it is the most radical Gundam redesign of the Gundams we have had, right? In the Gundam of Gundams competition, it is the most different, and it so embodies the unique aesthetic of G-Reco, which I love so much. As you say, I think like everything that show does visually kind of flows through the G-Self. The G-Self itself is such a sort of like, flowing, moldable, kind of changing mobile suit over the life of that short but vast series, in that it has this kind of core design. It gets all of these different sort of upgrades and versions and color variants, and I'm including all of those in there. One thing you didn't talk about, though, that I really want to sing the praises of with the G-Self is the color design of it. Like, there are a lot of Gundams, particularly in later Tomino shows, that kind of run from the primary color red, yellow, blue of the Gundams, So, like, the Gundam Mark II obviously revises that to be more sort of like he first imagined the Gundam before the toy manufacturers wanted brighter colors on it. Mm-hmm. The Zeta and the Double Zeta do have the brighter colors, but they're very big, and the colors aren't quite as bold as on the original Gundam. The Turn A Gundam is mostly white with the colors kind of in the chest piece area. But the thing that really I love about the G-Self is that it doesn't run from that at all. It, in fact, embraces it more than any Gundam since the original, and maybe even more so than the original, because this thing is just suffused with those big, bright primary colors. And I think something about the way G-Reco uses these pastel kinds of colors, something that really you need digital animation for, because doing that kind of color work by hand would be so prohibitively expensive and like difficult to achieve, and they're able to do it through digital ink and paint, and it's just utterly stunning. And I think the G-Self is a very big benefactor of that, and having the blue and the red and the yellow all over in tandem with those very rounded, fun corners and the kind of bug eyes and all of those sorts of things. Just, it's one of the mobile suits I look at and I just smile at hardest when I see it. It is one of my favorite Gundams. In the years to come, it might even go up where I'll just say I have this in my overall top 10, and it might even rise over the years. It's a phenomenal design that is also then at the heart of a lot of the best action in the history of Gundam, because G-Reco has the best Gundam action, and the G-Self is the core of a lot of that.
Yeah, no, it is a fucking amazing suit. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Moment of truth. What's your number one, Sean?
The moment of truth, my number one, this is the only thing that has altered a thing that is on my top 10 list, which I have known forever, because it is a variant of one of the all-time great mobile suits. It is my favorite version of this mobile suit, is the MS-06R-AB, the Zaku Amazing. Probably the best name for a mobile suit ever of all time, the Zaku Amazing. This is Meijin Kawaguchi's Char Zaku variant, and it is where, for me, the Char Zaku variant overtakes the original Zaku 2, which I respect the Char Zaku variant. I think it is great. I've always kind of preferred the, olive drab, harsh, soldierly look of the original Zaku 2 design a little bit more than the red Char Zaku. Then the origin kind of mild redesign of the red Char Zaku kind of tips is okay, now they're really finding, I think, the right balance here. And the Zaku Amazing to me hits the perfect balance of exactly the right shades of the kind of really dark red on the heavy armored parts, and then the kind of more pinkish red that's similar to what Origin does. And I think I like the balance that they strike a little bit even more in the specific color choices, a bit more in the Zaku Amazing. And then one of the things I love the most about it that I think really pushes it over the edge is it has the really nice infusion of black in areas that breaks up the red coloring that I think has always been maybe a bit too excessive to me on the red Char Zaku variants, and those blacks kind of breaking it up both in the mid armor section, but then also has these kind of weapon pods on the shoulders and on the legs that are also black that break up the kind of harsh solid coloring of the red chunks of the Zaku. And that to me is the thing that really pushes it into this space where it's okay, you have found the ideal version of the Zaku design that kind of takes some of the harder military grunt look of the original Zaku design and fused, I think, a little bit more of that kind of harder edge sensibility into the more sort of fantastical Red Baron thing that Char's special Zaku has. It also has two really cool dark red pouches on the side of it. That is where I think he puts his two pistols that he uses, and it does get points for the main weapon that the Zaku Amazing uses is not a big machine gun, but it's two fucking pistols, and it just gets up in your face and shoots you with them. It's just an all-time great mobile suit remix. It's not a crazy huge departure, but it is more of a departure than you would think, for something that is such an iconic design. It's something like the Zaku that does not have a lot of space, and it's fairly simplistic design to do something new with it and still capture the whole Zaku look. I think the Zaku Amazing is that kind of Goldilocks sweet spot, exactly what you want from this kind of remix of a classic iconic mobile suit. And so the Zaku Amazing is, in my opinion, the best mobile suit from the mobile suits of things that we watched in season 3 of this show.
Interesting. I was not predicting this. I love the Zaku Amazing. Obviously, it's great. I think of the versions of the Zaku, my favorite is still the Origin version, and I did not put that on my overall top 10 because I thought it too kind of minor a variance to kind of include it as a year 3 suit, although I could have. But I think this is a cool choice, Sean. And yes, the Zaku Amazing is still wonderful. If I might prefer the other one a little more, but no denying everything you just said. There's a lot of cool stuff. The pistols maybe being my favorite part too. It's a damn good suit.
It is like a perfect looking Zaku, and I love it. And again, it does get extra points for having the best fucking name of any mobile suit. The Zaku Amazing. Holy shit, so good.
Yes, absolutely. All right. Moment of truth. The top 10. Well, actually, before we go on, let's recap what we just did, especially because mine had a revision in the middle of it. My number 10 is the Kuma 3 Bear Guy-san.
My number 10 is the Cams-05 Mac Knife.
My number 9 is the Age Tri-Mag Gundam Tri-Age Magnum.
My number 9 is also the Age Tri-Mag Gundam Tri-Age Magnum.
My number 8 is the ASW G08 Gundam Barbatos.
My number 8 is the XVM-FZC Gundam Legolas.
My number 7 is the XMX9999 Crossbone Gundam Mao.
My number 7 is the RX-0 RX-0 Maru.
My number 6 is the MSAM034A Space Yanaham Space Type Klimnik Use.
My number 6 is the XXXG-01 WF Wing Gundam Fenice.
My number 5 is the RX-00 Maru.
My number 5 is the AMX-104 GG, the R Gyagya.
My number 4 is the RX-78AL Atlas Gundam.
My number 4 is the ASW-G-08 Gundam Barbatos Lupus.
My number 3 is the PFF X7 Core Gundam and all of its variants.
My number 3 is the YG-111 Gundam G Self.
My number 2 is the AMX-104 GGR Gaga.
My number 2 is the Kuma-03 Byakugai-san.
My number 1 is the YG-111 Gundam G Self.
And my number 1 is the MS-06R-AB, the Zaku Amazing.
And now, the moment of truth, our top 10 favorite mobile suits from the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise. I'm nervous about this one, Sean, because I spent so long playing with this. The way I finally did it, I knew my 10, and then the ranking was absolutely just terrifying for me, so I put them all in a PowerPoint, and I was just sliding the slides around to help me rank them. The top 5 I'm really happy with. I think I like the relative placements of everything else, but man, I could go either way. There's a lot here.
My top 10 was extremely easy. I went to my old document, I hit copy, I went to my new document, I hit paste, and then I went and I replaced the name of one of them with a variant of that one that I've been waiting to put in that spot for years at this point.
But I haven't been in the point of having everything. So now that I have everything, I feel like... And mine is... The top 3 are pretty recognizable for me, but a lot of this is different because I think something about having seen everything puts it into perspective for me more. Mm-hmm. What I like and dislike and like what is at the top for me. So there you go. Let's get into this, Sean. What is your number 10?
My number 10, the classic, the OG, the RX-782, the original Mobile Suit Gundam.
Wonderful. I like that one too. My number 10 is the MSN 00100 Hyaku Shiki, which is Char's mobile suit from Zeta, designed by Mamoru Nagano. It's gold. It's awesome. It looks phenomenal in action. It's very cool. And you'll see Char kind of dominates this list.
You know, he dominates lots of lists for good reason. My number 9 is the Osh-00 mobile suit, the Tall Geese.
Excellent choice. My number 9 is the System Turn A 99 Turn A Gundam, called Turn A Gundam, designed by Sid Mead. It's got a mustache, it's friendly, it carries cows. What can't this thing do?
That is also on my list, a little bit higher up. My number 8 is the RX-178, the Gundam Mark II, the best redesign of the original Gundam. The Gundam Mark II, just perfect. Just like that perfect, like not a super special Gundam. It's just right in that sweet spot of not necessarily having to be the main Gundam. The Gundam Mark II, love it.
My number 8 is the YMS-15 Gyan from the original Gundam, designed by Kunio Okawara. It's the original, it's the great, it's Makuve's suit, it's got that fucking shield, I love it.
Arewa ii mono da. Alright, number 7, the XXXG-00WO, the Wing Gundam Zero Endless Waltz variant. They put fucking bird wings on this goddamn Gundam, and it is so goddamn cool.
My number 7 is the YG-111 Gundam G-Self. We were just talking about it. I don't need to go over it all again, but man, those colors, that roundedness, it could rise in the years to come. I love it. This was the one designed by Akira Yasuda.
Very good. My number 6 is the System Turn A 99 Turn A Gundam. As you said, Jonathan, it's got a mustache. What else could you ask for?
My number 6 is the original, the hardest to rank, the one that started it all, the RX-78-2 Gundam designed by Kunio Okawara with the original red, blue, yellow, white. I think the thing that just will always keep this on the list for me, even if there are other Gundams I like more, is how versatile it has been over the years in just that original shape and colors. Artists have found so many cool ways to do stuff with that. It still cuts a big shadow. It's still part of the top 10.
Yeah, 100%. My number 5 is the MSN-04, the Sazabi. This is Char's mobile suit from Char's Counterattack. His best mobile suit, in my opinion, and it is his mobile suit on this list.
It's a very good one. My number 5 is the F91 Gundam F91. And I will also just include here as like a side the F91 Imagine from Build Fighters, which is really just a color swap. Mm-hmm. It's just sort of red in some places. The F91, I searched my heart. I looked through a lot of pictures. I thought about it. It is my second favorite Gundam, and that is why it is here. I just love the sleekness of it, the size of it, the way that chest piece comes out, the balance of white, that the red F91 lettering on it. And the F91 Imagine just putting red all over it and then having those little yellow sort of wing things that kind of come out, turning those neon red. I love the helmet piece where we've got the dual yellow V's. The F91 is just, it's always been on my top 10, but when I really searched my heart, it became a top 5 for me. It's one of my very, very favorite Gundams.
Yeah, F91 is, absolutely a great Gundam.
Yeah, and a Kunio Okawara original. It's great.
Yep. All right, my number 4 is the AMX-004, the Cubile. Haman Karn up in here representing one of the best weird mobile suits in the franchise. Like, one of the most influential. Like, every show has to have, it's like, this is the Cubile of this show, the weird kind of, like, rounded shell look. Cubile, it's a classic for a reason.
Absolutely. My number 4, you just mentioned this one. It's the MSN-04 Sazabi from Char's Counterattack, designed by the great Yutaka Izubuchi, who did the suits for this movie, who later became part of the team that did Pat Labor. Just a great mecha designer. And the Sazabi, man, I love it to death. It's big, it's hulking, it's got a perfect red design. It's got maybe my favorite shield in all of Gundam, the big black shield with red trim, the gold. God, it looks so fucking cool. And I also just want to give a shout out to some variants, including the Sinanju from Unicorn Gundam is a really cool upgrade of this. And of course, from Build Fighters, you have the Miss Sazabi,
yes,
which we can't not mention because it's fantastic.
Yes, Miss Sazabi was one that, like, I really wanted to put on my top 10 for the Season 3 stuff. I'm like, I can't find a spot to put this, but my god, the Miss Sazabi is such a good redesign, and it is up there with the Zaku Amazing as having one of the all-time great Gundam, like, mobile suit names.
Yeah.
Very good. So my number 3 is the MS-06R-AB Zaku Amazing. We just talked about it. This used to be the original classic Zaku 2 on the list. It is now the Zaku Amazing takes its rightful place as the best Zaku design, and so it gets the Zaku spot on my list.
All right. My number 3 is the RX-93 New Gundam, aka New Gundam, from Char's Counterattack, also designed by Yutaka Izubuchi. This is the best Gundam. It's the top Gundam on my list. It has just the color scheme, the balance of white, black, yellow, red. I don't even know, is it black or is it navy blue? It's so inky that you don't know. Yeah. And then those fucking funnels, the coolest funnels in the series, in my opinion, that come off and, sort of fold and all of that. It doesn't get any better than that. It's so cool.
My number 2 is the RX-93 New Gundam. It is factually correct. This is the best Gundam. That's just the facts. Like, if you don't like it, like, deal with it. The New Gundam is us. I'll say, when they did the 40th anniversary poll in Japan, guess what was voted as the best mobile suit? The New Gundam. It is the best one. It's got the cool, like, big one wing of the fin funnels. It's got one of the best color designs of any Gundam. It's a fucking New Gundam. It is not just for show, as Amr likes to say. It is the fucking New Gundam.
Absolutely. My number 2 is the MS-06S Char Zaku 2, specifically the variant from Gundam The Origin, designed by Kunio Okawara, with the updates by Hajime Katoki. For me, it is mainly the color setting of the Origin version is just so perfect. Some of the extra detail and lettering on it. This is the first Gunpla I ever built, also, and it's still one of my favorites. It's one of the best HG sets you can get. First one I did full panel lining on. Man, I love this thing. It's great.
It's very good. It's maybe not amazing, but it is very, very good. My number one is the MS-07B-3 Goof Custom, the one and only, the most badass mobile suit, the one that, like, if you just want the most mobile suit eye candy, just fucking put on 08MS Team and put on that episode where the Goof Custom fucks everybody up. It's got a cool grappling hook. It's got a cool shield with a big Gatling gun on it. It's got a big fucking knife. The Goof Custom, the coloring, everything, perfect. Just perfect.
And y'all know this is one where Sean and I are in lockstep, because my number one is the MS-07B3 Goof Custom from the 08MS Team. This is also one that is a Kunio Okawara original with alterations by Hajime Katoki, and just perfect in every way, and at the center of the best action sequence in the history of Gundam. This is the thing 08MS Team will always have a leg up on over every other Gundam in perpetuity, is that episode, this mobile suit, and that fight. It is the number one.
Yeah, it is just, it's amazing. Yeah, so I'm glad that we're still in agreement on what is number one.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, should we move on to characters now, Sean?
Yes, let's move on to characters. I think with characters we probably don't have to spend as much time on, because we've spent an hour doing mobile suits. So if we want to get to our party lists, we need to make sure we're not going on too long on this one.
Well, the thing about characters is that we have talked about all of them before, so that makes it a little easier. Some of those mobile suits, that maybe we gloss over them in the episode, but I know, for instance, Char is on both of our lists, and we've talked about Char, I don't know, an hour or two maybe?
Yes, I mean, we could have called this just like the Char cast, and it would have not have been an inappropriate name for this podcast with how much we've talked about Char, so yes.
And I also want to say, for my top 10 characters, I have their name, I have what show they're from, I have their voice actor, and then I also kept track of, are they dead or alive? And 6 of my 10 are dead, although one of those is ambiguous for reasons we'll get to soon. But yeah, let's go ahead. I'll kick us off, Sean. These are the top 10 characters from all of Gundam. My number 10 is Toho Fuhai, Master Asia from Mobile Fighter G Gundam, voiced by Yosuke Akimoto. Very dead. One of the best Gundam deaths. One of the best Gundam villains. I love Toho Fuhai. He rocks. He's on this list.
Master Asia is great. Didn't quite make my list, but he is great. And I'll just say, obviously this fucking top 10 character list is like an insane thing to make.
It's ridiculous.
Like there's so like if someone didn't make the top 10, it's not like we're like neither of us are spiting them or something. It's just like this was a lot of like real gut check. Yeah, I think that this works on this list for me. So my number 10 from Gundam Seed. Specifically from Gundam Seed, and we'll just kind of ignore Seed Destiny in this case, because, my number 10 is Lacus Klein, played by Tanaka Rie. This is one of those characters that, on a rewatch, it is one of the most impressive characters in Gundam to me, how much you see early on them plant the seeds for how manipulative and duplicitous she actually is, and how effective it is that it is very hard to catch on first watch, how much she is putting people off their guard with her sort of ditzy princess act. And then once like the other shoe drops and you realize that she's actually like the fucking leader of the revolution, it's amazing. And I think Tanaka Rie, for something that was a really early performance for her, she knocks it out of the park. Great character, great performance.
I need to watch the original Gundam Seed again so I can remember all of this more clearly, because Destiny is fresher in my mind, but I don't disagree with any of that. Good choice. My number 9 is Setsuna F. Seiei, one of the best of the Gundam Boys from Double O, voiced by the great Mamoru Miyano. He does live through his series, although he undergoes a little bit of a transformation at the end. He is, in fact, the only Gundam character to become a metal boy. And we love Setsuna F. Seiei here. Also, might show up on the best names list, because goddamn, it's a great name.
Yeah, he is a little bit higher on my list, but yes, Setsuna F. Seiei is a great character. My number 9, this is what I had a hard time placing. My number 9 is Haman Karn, played by Sakaki Baru Yoshiko. I think the only reason why I put her lower on the list is because she doesn't have as much screen time as a lot of the other characters, so she doesn't have as like big of a range of stuff to play. But Haman Karn is our queen in space. she's Haman Karn. Like, I could not have her not be on the list, or she would have me killed. So Haman Karn, number 9, I love you.
My number 8 is one that I thought about and then I realized had to be on here because it is one of the most unique Gundam characters, and that is Flit Asano from Mobile Suit Gundam Age, voiced as a boy by Toshiyuki Toyonaga and as an adult by Kazuhiko Inoue. Does live through his series, goes through an entire life. The only Gundam character who we see from basically birth to old age and beyond. And as a result is one of the best and most original and unique of the Gundam Boys post-Amuro, and just one of the best and most well-rounded characters in the series. Also becomes an old man with cool goggles and everything. Just, man, I love Flit.
Yeah, he is also on my list. He's a little bit higher up. So yes, we are
Wonderful.
definitely agree that he should be on here. My number 8, from all the way back in Victory Gundam, it's Kateshina-san, or Kateshina-Luce, played by Watanabe Kumiko. One of the, we have another list talking about villains, so maybe I shouldn't say too much about that. But she's, of, the antagonists or villains in Gundam, she's definitely at least near the top. Kateshina-san, one of the most memorable characters, I think, in all of Gundam. And, one of the character that, to me, in particular, kind of pushes Victory Gundam into the, really fascinating space that show is. And one of the things that got, I think one of the reasons why Victory Gundam, when we ranked that show, kept on getting higher and higher over the course of the years on this podcast, is I think so there's something about Kateshina and her role in that show that I think does a thing that no other antagonist has ever done in Gundam. So I needed to put her on this list.
I'm glad it's on yours. She's not on mine, but wonderful character. A villain who is on my list is my number 7 of Haman Karn by Yoshiko Sakakibara. We love her. She's the Space Queen.
She's the Space Queen. My number 7, if we're, because I wasn't doing a Are They Dead or Not on my list, but this character very much died, is Orga Itsuka, played by Hoseo Yoshimasa. Orga, the Dancho, the man himself from Iron-Blooded Orphans. I'd follow him to the fucking ends of the world. Such a fascinating, charismatic character. And just such a brutal, tragic thing with him in the show, but so effective, and he's so lovable. I just love Orga. I think that's a character I could just watch in any scene doing anything and be immensely entertained because of how likable he is.
My number 6 is Orga Itsuka.
Nice.
But I've cheated, and it's Orga Itsuka and Mikazuki Agus.
I thought
together.
about doing that too. I thought about putting them together because kind of secretly it is them together. Orga's my favorite of the two from Iron-Blooded Orphans, but they are kind of inseparable characters. So I think it's fair to kind of cheat a little bit on that one.
Well, thank you, because here's the thing. When I made my list of Gundam Boys, Mikazuki is the Gundam boy from IBO, and he is lower on that list than Setsuna or Flit. But he is higher on this list with Orga, and that felt right to me, because I think that character's full potential is only unlocked when you consider him as a unit with Orga, and vice versa. As entertaining as Orga is, he is most interesting as the other side of the coin that is Mikazuki. And just those two together, voiced by, as you say, Hosea Yoshimasa, plus Kawanishi Kengo as Mikazuki, one of the most dynamic and interesting pairs of characters in the franchise, 2 of the best deaths in the franchise. Orga in particular, his is one of the most transcendent sequences the franchise has ever produced. And just as I would say, the dual combined protagonist of Iron-Blooded Orphans, one of the best and most original protagonists, behind only 2 others on this list in terms of just actual protagonists for me. So, yeah.
Yeah, great characters. All right, so my number 6 is Sayla Mass, played both by Yo Inoue and Han Megumi. This is the Gestalt version of Sayla. This is original Gundam Sayla, and this is Origin, both the OVAs and the manga I'm taking into account here as well. Because I think that's the stuff that pushes Sayla really high up on this list for me, was reading the Origin manga, where she is given more of a kind of broadly principal role. Obviously, she's a very major character in the original TV show also, but all the stuff that they do with the flashbacks that you see in the OVAs, as well as some material they add for her, particularly near the end, where she is really critical in the climax, starting this revolution on Abawaku, and revealing herself as being Artesia to them, and kind of using that aspect of her identity, really kind of brings Sayla a level of prominence in the end that I think it feels like the character was always supposed to have post Mobile Suit Gundam, but because of scheduling stuff and weird things that happened, Inoue just wasn't able to come back for large stretches after the original Mobile Suit Gundam. So that character, like the original anime incarnation, went a little bit unfulfilled by the end compared to Char and Amuro. And then the origin, I think, comes in and kind of fills in that gap and gives that character the kind of the full conclusion that she deserved. And when you get that, like, Sayla becomes, I think, one of the best characters in all of Gundam. And so she's number 6 on my list.
I think that's a great choice. I don't have Sayla on my list. I love Sayla, and I think if I had considered it the way you did, of doing a sort of gestalt of the version from the manga specifically, and then what we get in the origin anime and what we get in the original Gundam, I think she might have broken onto mine. I wasn't quite thinking in that way, but I think that's a really good choice and explanation.
Thank you.
My number 5 is Captain Bright. And in the spot where it says what show he's from, I just wrote all of it, all the Gundams. Yes. Because Captain Bright is the biggest Gundam character in terms of appearances, voiced by the great Hirotaka Suzuoki, who has passed away, and we now have a new voice actor who has done a great job. Yeah, but the original
Ken is the current voice actor. Yeah.
Yes, and a very good replacement. But Hirotaka Suzuoki was the voice of Gundam for a long time. A character who did live. He lived through a lot of shit. This is the guy, if you want to win a space war, you call Captain Bright, because he's won some space wars.
Yes, 100%. I'll say I didn't put Bright on my list because I couldn't have 4 OG Gundam characters on my list. I'm like, I gotta rep more of the franchise. And I was like, Jonathan's gonna put Bright on his list. It's fine.
It's Captain Bright. I mean, for God's sakes, this is the guy who gives the corrections. He's gonna slap the shit out of you for that, Sean.
Yeah, I think the thing that kept him off of the list to me is just like partially outside of the original Mobile Suit Gundam, he doesn't have like big character arcs usually. He's a great character, and I love him. He is my number 11, obviously, like, cause he was on the list for a while, and then I was like, because he was actually on the list and Haman Karn wasn't, and I was like, I can't, I gotta put Haman on here. That was the choice I ended up making. But yes, obviously Captain Bright deserves to be on that list. But I knew that he would be on yours, so I kind of cheated a little bit. All right, my number 5, he was on your list earlier, is Flit Asno. As you said, played in Boyhood by Toyonaga Toshiyuki, played in Adulthood by everybody's favorite Naruto actor, Inoue Kazuhiko. This is like where Gundam Age gets to kind of plant its flag in Gundam lists. Yes. I think is in top 10 characters with Flit. It is like the thing that show does in a remarkable way that other Gundam shows can't do because of their premise, right? So Flit gets the luxury of being able to have his whole lifetime explored, and it feels like it would be wrong not to have him on this list because it's like it's the thing that he has that other Gundam characters don't get, and Gundam Age does such a great job with it. And it's such a touching thing. That moment when you get to the end of Gundam Age and you have that like brief moment where you get access to adult Flit's like sort of internality, and you see little boy Flit again for the first time in like 30 episodes of that show, and he's like in the cockpit, and Toyonaga Toshiyuki comes back for a few lines. It's like one of the most emotional moments in any Gundam show because you have been on this journey with this character and seen his whole life. So yeah, Flit absolutely. If Flit is not in your top 10 Gundam characters, you've done something wrong with your list, in my opinion.
I agree, because he's in my top 10.
Exactly. I'm talking not to you. I'm talking to the world. People out there. I know. These Gundam Age haters, fuck off. Flit is great.
There's one excuse for not having him in your top 10, and that's if you haven't seen Gundam Age yet. And if you haven't, that's fine. Go watch Gundam Age. It's a little slow to start, but then it becomes one of the best Gundams, so you should watch it. All right, my number 4 is also kind of a 2-character combination, but I think this is a very defensible one because it is Deanna Soriel and Kihelheim from Turn A Gundam, both voiced by Reiko Takahashi. Both lived through their series, maybe in the case of Deanna. But she's alive at the end when we cut to black, I think. But, maybe after that. But no, Turn A Gundam is the second best Gundam. And it is the second best Gundam for a lot of reasons, but if you were to list those reasons, Deanna and Kihel and the Prince and the Pauper narrative at the center of that show is probably the thing that maybe is at the top of that list.
Yeah, I'll say she's slightly up higher on my list, so and I did the same thing where I put both of them together because it would feel weird to try to separate them.
Yeah. That show's exploration of identity and privilege and place and all of that it all flows through Deanna and Kihel.
Yeah,
So.
they're the key characters of that show.
Yeah.
All right, so my number 4, you mentioned him a little bit earlier, is Setsuna F. Seiei, played by Miyano Mamoru, the Gundam boy of Double O Gundam. Just one of the all-time great Gundam boys. He's the highest Gundam boy on this list of top 10 characters to me, which I think is appropriate. I think he takes the thing that Hiroyui tried to do and fell flat on his face and executes it to a masterful degree. Setsuna is just one of the all-time great Gundam protagonists. He is himself Gundam, so he's got to be high up on this list.
Very much so. My number 3 is Ramba Ral / Mr. Ral. We now get to add that in. From Gundam 79, Gundam The Origin, and Gundam Build Fighters and Build Fighters Try, voiced by Masashi Hirose in his original incarnations. He was killed in action. He was reborn in the world of Gundam Build Fighters. I think we clearly established that Mr. Ral is just Ramba Ral, living in the world of Gundam Build Fighter, so it is one continuous character, and he is both one of the best parts of OG Gundam, and then helps, usher in this beautiful new build era that we're in. It's the Ral, it's Ral-san, it's Ramba Ral. He's the best.
Yeah, I'll say that Ramba Ral was another hard cut on my list in a way.
What the fuck are you talking about, Ramba Ral-san?
I can't have half the list be OG Gundam characters.
You can if it's Ramba Ral.
We watched an entire 3 years of this podcast of characters. Ramba Ral. We have another list somewhere that character will be repped on. Is another reason why I felt comfortable cutting him off of my list. But yes, Ramba Ral is great. Obviously deserves to be on the top 10 character list. I won't disagree. My number 3, though, is Deanna Sorel and Kiel Heim, played by Takashi Reiko from Turn A Gundam. They are the lifeblood of the other Best Gundam show. One of the best constructions in Gundam in terms of narrative and story and character. Incredible performance. Amazing character design, all top to bottom. Just incredible.
Absolutely. I'm guessing we have the same top 2.
It's got to be, right?
I'll do the honors. I'll say our number 2, and you'll say our number 1. Our number 2 is Amuro Rei, voiced by Toru Furuya.
Yep, that is our number 2. And do you want me to just say my number 1 right now?
Go ahead.
Our number 1 is Char Aznable, played by Ikeda Shuichi or Shuichi Keita. This was the easiest, that's the top 2. It's just as soon as you start writing the list, it's I'm just going to put them there and then think about the rest of this list. Because, of course, it's the OG Gundam boy and Char himself. Sure, there's no way Char is not the top of the top 10 Gundam characters list. It's just not possible. And if Char's at the top, there's no way that anyone other than Amuro can be at number 2. It's just, it is the way that, I think, in terms of scientific laws of physics, I think it's just mathematically it has to work that way. There's no other way to resolve a list like this. Anything else would just be incorrect.
No, that's right. Amuro is I feel a little bad for Toru Furuya, who always has to be just perpetually the second best Gundam character, because Shuichi Keita is over here doing his thing. But hey, Char Aznable is the character we have spent the most hours talking about, and Amuro is probably second behind that.
Yeah.
And for good reason. They are the archetypes on which Gundam is built, and there would be no Gundam without them, and they're also just the most entertaining characters in the franchise. So, there you go.
There's a reason why we keep on coming back to Amuro. There's a reason why we have, Toru Furuya in his 60s is still playing a 15-year-old Amuro Rei in a movie that's in Japanese theaters. There's a reason why that happens, and it's because, those two characters changed the face of anime. So, of course, they have to be at the top.
Absolutely. So those are our top 10 Gundam characters, and we have now, Sean, done all the lists that they did for the big 40th anniversary in Japan, and that we set out to do 3 years ago. And now it's time for the party lists.
Yes. Do we want to talk about that top 40 list? Do you want to run through some of their choices at all?
Sure, let's go ahead. Yeah, just to compare. I've done this on my own looking at them, but for the listeners, I think this would be good. Yeah.
Let's just do their top 10, and then if there's anything that
Can you throw me the link in the chat?
Yes, I'll bring in the link. Yeah, so for reference for people, listeners to the podcast who maybe don't know what we're referring to, when we started this podcast, which just coincidentally was on the 40th anniversary year of Gundam, it's not like we planned that or anything, there was a huge TV show done in Japan through NHK, the broadcast studio, that as part of that they did a massive poll where they polled people on their favorite anime. They used the word sakuhin, so works like TV shows, movies, OVA series, on their favorite mobile suits, on their favorite characters, which they kind of did in two ways. They had people, it was like, Char is represented in like 8 different things because it's like Mobile Suit Gundam Char is different than Zeta, and so there are 2 versions of the list, one where they're all kind of combined and one where it's like separated out by different versions of the character. And they also did Gundam songs. And so that's how it was done. You can find the list online if you just Google like Gundam 40th Anniversary Survey. It's all in Japanese, but luckily most of the things that highlight what a Gundam's title is usually is just written in English to be fancy anyway. So even if you don't speak Japanese, you can probably figure out most of what it is pretty quick.
But let's go through the main 4 they have here, because I think these are fun to just analyze. And we can just maybe read these out together, swapping them back and forth.
Yeah.
So this was the official Japan poll. So this is the top 10 shows. Their number 10 was 0083 Stardust Memory.
Yeah.
Fucking madness.
Yeah,
but okay.
It's crazy. Yeah, that's 1 slot above War in the Pocket. It's crazy. It's 2 slots above
Sweet
08th MS
Jesus.
Team. Like, I don't understand. Their number 9, also, can't agree with this, although I know that it's popular, so I understand how it's got here, is Gundam Wing.
Their number 8, I love that this is at the top, is Mobile Fighter G Gundam. Not in either of our top 10s, but we love this show, and I think it being a public favorite like that is really just kind of sweet.
Yeah, and I think it's something that, like, I suspect it's specifically how, like, the timing works out is, like, that how G Gundam... I know that G Gundam didn't used to be that popular, but obviously it's, like, the people who grew up with it now are all, like, older people who are voting on these polls. And so it's moved up a lot in the popularity over the years. Their number 7 is Unicorn Gundam.
Yep, their number 6 is Iron-Blooded Orphans, which would have been the most recent at the time of this poll, but very deservingly in the top 10.
Yep, their number 5 is Char's Counterattack.
Their number 4 is Gundam 00, which I think is... I think Gundam 00 wound up at like 6 or 5 on ours, but very near the top 2, so There you go.
I mean, it was within my top 5. My personal top 5. Their number 3 is Gundam Seed, appropriately very, very up high. I wouldn't have put it this high, but it does deserve to be very, very high.
And it is very popular in Japan, so it makes sense. Their number 2 is Zeta.
And the number 1 is OG Gundam, because, of course, First Gundam. I don't agree with everything on all these lists, but hey, the number 1 is right.
The number 1 is right, and I do love that the Japanese public is in lockstep with us on this podcast, because once in a while... I think the English fandom we get pushback from on the like, OG Gundam's the best, is crusty old, and then the Japanese public is like, shut the fuck up, it's First Gundam. It's our cultural heritage, goddammit,
Yeah.
It's a part of history. It's the only thing that I think really stings about their top 10 is that Turn A isn't on it, and Turn A does not appear until 19 in the overall rankings. That's Victory Gundam. Never
Turn
mind.
A Gundam is number 13 on their list. Yeah.
Okay. I got the V mixed up with a Turned A. I apologize for that.
That's fair enough.
But it's 13. Okay.
Yeah, I'm actually shocked that Turn A Gundam is as high as it is because, like, that's one that I know was not super popular in Japan for a long time, which makes sense to me. It's not like a crowd pleaser of a show, even if it is, like, one of the best TV shows. I think the thing that's most painful to me is See Destiny being 1 slot above Mobile Suit Gundam 3, the movie. That's just
sweet Jesus, what?
Yeah. See Destiny is at number 14,
That's not okay. That's not okay. It's 1 above Turn A or below Turn A Gundam. That's okay. Let's move over to their mobile suits.
Yes. So on to mobile suits. So we'll do the same thing. I'll start with their number 10. Their number 10 is the OG Gundam. It's funny because that's also my number 10.
Their number 9 is the Gundam F91, which I love being in the top 10, was also above the Gundam for me, so it makes sense for me, too.
Yeah. The number 8 is the Sazabi from Char's Counterattack.
We obviously both agree on that. And the number 7 was the Cubile from... Yeah, absolutely. So cool to have it here. Love it.
Yes, and then the number 6 is the Hyakishiki. That's a Jonathan pick there.
Yep. Number 5 was the Freedom Gundam from Seed.
Yes, not quite on either our lists, but that is Freedom Gundam is a great Gundam. The number 4, this great pick, is the Wing Gundam Zero, specifically the Endless Waltz version. So they do separate out the Endless Waltz version, and that is what is up here.
The number 3 is the Strike Freedom Gundam from See Destiny, which this is a little bit of the get your seat out of here a little bit. This is too much. Pick one of the two. Damn it, Japanese public. Why didn't you all get together and pick one of the two?
The Strike Freedom is obviously the better version of the Freedom Gundam, and they should have they should have put the Freedom Gundam down and put the Zaku 2 up, which was the number 11. The Zaku 2 should have been in the top 10. Their number 2 was the Zeta Gundam from Zeta Gundam.
Their number 1 is the New Gundam. From Char's Counterattack, obviously the best Gundam. For a second there, though, I have to admit, I forgot that is the symbol for new, and I went, why is the Victory Gundam their number one? And then I remembered, no, it is the new Gundam.
Yeah, they do have the pronunciation right next to it, because nobody is going to know how to read that if you don't put it there. Yeah.
That's how I realized, was like, I saw like Victory Gundam, and then I went, oh, new Gundam. Okay, there we go. Yes, so new Gundam at number one. Excellent choice.
Yeah, I think other than doubling up on the Strike Freedom and the Freedom, I think this is a great list. If they just took the Freedom out and put the Zakutu, which was at number 11, in, I would have no qualms with it. Obviously, like, the Goof should be higher. The Goof Custom is at number 14, which is still very high, but other than that, I think this is a very good list.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it needs some Zaku representation, but, again, this is the general public voting. This is surprisingly good.
Yeah.
All right. Characters. This one's fun. And are we doing the combined one here?
Yes, yeah. So it's the default one that's like that left tab.
Okay. Yeah, so their number 10 was Asuran Zara from Gundam Seed.
Yes, the Ishida Akira representation. Everyone loves Ishida Akira. Asune is a great character. Number 9 is Haman Khan, which it's especially fun seeing Haman Khan written out in katakana, because you just really get that, like, the great, like, extended vowel pronunciations on Haman Khan. Fantastic.
Yep, number 8 is Anavel Gato from Stardust Memory. I wouldn't put him in the top 10, but if you're going to do any Stardust Memory stuff in a top 10, this one offends me least, because Anavel Gato is the best character in it, and I wish the show was just about him.
Yeah, it's an Akio Utsuka character. I can't complain too much with an Akio Utsuka character being in your top 10 list. All right, number 7 is Kamiyu Bidan, the main character from Zeta Gundam.
Number 6 is Setsuna F. Sei, which I love when that is written in Japanese. It is kanji, then it is just the letter F, and then it is katakana. It's a crazy name. I love it.
Yes, he uses 3 different writing systems for the 3 parts of his name. It is great.
Yes.
Number 5 is Graham Aker, or Graham Aker, or they also have here Mr. Bushido. Of course, great choice. He was on my list of things I considered for my top 10 characters.
Me too.
Didn't quite make it.
He's great. I kind of love that he gets that high. I can see the fangirls voting, and he deserves it.
Yeah.
He's a sex symbol. My number 4 is Kira, or my number 4, their number 4 is Kira Yamato's.
Yes, main character.
Why did I say Yamato's? Kira Yamato from Seed and Seed Destiny, and I really feel like this is one where maybe you do want to separate it out, because if it's just Kira from Seed, I can maybe see him being in the top 10. If it's Kira from Seed Destiny, that should be the bottom 10. So, evens out a little bit in my mind, but there you go.
Yeah. Yes, I obviously agree with that. Number 3 is Orga Itsuka, our boy Dancho from Tekketsu no Orphans, who is there both because he's legitimately a great character and because he got memed on the Japanese internet. So there's 2 reasons why he's very high up.
Well, and I totally love that he's on the list and he's that high. Is very cool. But yes, the meme thing helps. And then their number 2 and 1 is what you would expect. It's Amuro Ray.
And the number 1 is Char's Nob.
And next to that, they have all his other names there. Quattro Bagina and Casval Rem Daikun. I love it.
Yes, it is. I think this is a pretty good list. Again, I think Anavel Gato is okay, this may be a bit high, but it is Akio Otsuka, so you can't complain too much.
Yeah. And then the songs top 10 is really cool, and you and I both know it well because it is the first Gundam song covers album. Hiroko Moriguchi just did the 10 for that first album, so I'm well acquainted with this top 10.
Yeah, and then the rest of the 40 was used in consideration for the other lists. But obviously, there's some right stuff that prevented some of the songs from being covered. But yes,
right.
So the number 10 for Gundam songs in Japan is Re I Am by Aimee.
Number 9 was the I'm forgetting the name of the song in English, but it's the first opening to Zeta Gundam.
Yeah, it's Across the Time. Tokyo Koite.
Right.
Number 8 is Meguri Ai, or Encounters, from the 3rd Mobile Suit Gundam movie.
Number 7 is Just Communication.
Yep. Number 6 is Phrygia by Udu.
Number 5 is Shine in the Storm is the English title. It's the 08MS team opening.
Yes. Number 4 is Beyond the Time, Mebius no Uchiyo Koite by Team Network.
Number 3 is Eternal Wind from F91, Moriguchi original.
Yes. The number 2 is I Senshi, the song from Mobile Suit Gundam 2.
And number 1 is, I think, exactly what you would expect it to be for this kind of thing, which is From the Aqueous Star with Love is the English title, and it is the Hiroko Moriguchi opening to Zeta.
Yes, so the second opening theme from Zeta. Yes, just a great list. And then the rest of the list, this is a very good list of songs. Yeah. I obviously we'll disagree with like the specific rankings, but I think the general thrust of how it was ranked in Japan is like a very good list.
No bad songs on it, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's awesome. And again, if you've never listened to the Gundam song covers albums, well, you're missing out on a lot in life, I'll tell you that.
Yes. They are amazing.
All right, now should we go over to our party lists now that we've compared ourselves with the Japanese public?
Yes, and seeing where the Japanese public stand, which is like honestly not that different. Like there's a couple of spots where it's like kind of a okay, but generally speaking, I think it's interesting how I think aligned a lot of our rankings are with that poll.
It feels like something the Japanese public took seriously, because I can just imagine the equivalent for, like, I don't know, Star Wars polls or something being complete fucking trash in English. Like, somehow Episode 7 would end up on top, like, Kylo Ren would be the best character. It wouldn't be good.
Yes. One thing that's interesting for people listening to the podcast, if you want to look at this list, for the anime shows section, the top 10 have demographic breakdowns for who voted for it, which is very interesting. It's got, like, gender and age breakdowns. So if you want to see that, like, how popular Seed and Double O is with, like, female audiences and stuff, it's, like, actually cool, interesting data. So just throw that out there. For people who are curious, you can check that out.
That's awesome. All right, so for our party lists, we've got a ton, and let's start with, we're just going to go in the order I have them on the page. The first one will be our top 10 Gundam Boys, and then our worst 5 Gundam Boys.
Yes.
We're going to put our money where our mouths are. Let's see how this goes. Top 10 Gundam Boys. Let's just go back and forth. We don't have to do these, spend a ton of time on these. But Sean, my number 10 best Gundam Boy is Bellary Zenom from G-Reco.
So that is a very good Gundam Boy. My number 10 is Kira Yamato from Gundam Seed. There might be a different version of Kira Yamato on a different list, we'll see. But Gundam Seed Kira Yamato is my number 10.
Fair enough. My number 9 is Gerode Ran from After War Gundam X, a Gundam we don't have enough opportunities to talk about, but he is one of the best Gundam boys.
Yes, he is very good. And interestingly, he, like my number 9, Banaji Lynx, is one of those characters that trying to say his name in English versus Japanese is very confusing. Is it Banaji? Do you say Banager? Is it Garrod? Is it Garodo? How do you say their names? Who knows? But Banaji, adorable Gundam boy.
Love Banaji, not quite on mine. It was funny, my brother watched Unicorn Gundam recently, and he said something to me about Banager, and I went, who's that? And he's like, the hero from, and I'm like, oh, Banaji. I'm like, okay, I understand. You didn't say it wrong. I just couldn't understand it outside of the Banaji.
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's the fault of whoever decided that would be the official spelling.
My number 8 is Camille Bidan from Zeta.
Very good Gundam Boy. My number 8, I think the youngest of the Gundam Boys, is Uso Evan from Victory Gundam.
This was his mother. My number 7 is Mikazuki August from Iron-Blooded Orphans.
Very funny. My number 7 is also Mikazuki August from Iron-Blooded Orphans. We are in lockstep on that one.
My number 6 is 2 characters in one, but I think very justifiably it is Sei Iori and Reiji from Build Fighters. They have to go together. They are the Gundam Boy from Build Fighters, and they're my number 6.
It's funny. They're a little bit higher on my list, but I did the exact same thing. Of like, I couldn't figure out what to do, and I was like, together they make up one Gundam Boy, and I think that is a fair assessment. But my number 6 is Camille Bidan from Zeta Gundam.
My number 5 is Judo Ashita from Double Zeta. It's just a great character.
My number 5 is also Judo Ashita from Double Zeta, so we are on lockstep on that one, and Mika.
My number 4 is Lauren Sehak / Laura Rolla from Turn A.
Very good. My number 4 is Setsuna F. Seiei from Double O Gundam.
My number 3 is Setsuna F. Seiei from Double O Gundam.
My number 3 is Sei and Reiji, the combined Gundam Boy of Gundam Build Fighters.
My number 2 is Flit Asano from Gundam Age.
So for Flit, I kind of ended up slightly disqualifying him from the list because he's only a Gundam Boy for like 12 episodes of that show, and I didn't know what to do with that information. So I was like, That is fair. Amuro is also someone who ages out of being a Gundam Boy, although you could just use him as from original Gundam. I decided he is one, and then he grows up, and he's so unique, he became my number 2 for that reason. So I wrote him in my list of all the Gundam Boys I wrote down. I put in Flit, and then next to it I put in parentheses disqualified for being a Gundam man. That was what I wrote there. My number 2 is Lauren Sayak from Turn A Gundam.
Fair enough. My number 1 is Amuro Ray.
And my number 1 is also Amuro-Ray, but it is Mobile Suit Gundam Amuro-Ray, because that is the only time that he is a Gundam boy, is in Mobile Suit Gundam. But he is a Gundam boy for an entire TV show, not one core of a TV show.
That is fair enough. I think my number, if you made me disqualify Flit and move everything up, at which point Setsuna is my number 2, then I think my number 11 would have probably been Banaji, or probably Uso for me. I think Uso would probably become my number 10 if you make me disqualify Flit. But I'm comfortable keeping Flit on the list. But
I think as long as you're considering the Gundam boy period of Flit, and that's what you're looking at, then yeah.
I'm not. I was considering all of.
Okay.
Okay, then I'm taking Flit off the list. I'm moving Setsuna up to 2. Everyone else gets moved up, and my number 10 is Uso Evan.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
Should I reread my list because of that, or do we all understand it? Okay,
it does not matter that much.
Okay, can we do our worst? The worst 5 Gundam Boys. This was a fun one to make, I have to say.
Yes, I think this was also a fun one for me. Do you want to start?
Yeah, my number 5, I guess you could argue whether this person is a boy, because really, age-wise, he's a man, but he acts like such a little fucking boy that I think it's worth it. It's Ko Uraki from Stardust Memories. He's in a man's body, but God, he's a Gundam boy, and he's a fucking idiot.
I didn't really consider Ko, but I agree with the reasoning, so I will approve that yes, that is exactly it. He should be more of an adult, and yet he is a little 5-year-old boy in a grown man's body, and it's disturbing.
Yeah, he is more scared of asking a girl out than flying in his fucking mobile suit, and it ruins the series.
Yep. My number 5 from Gundam Wing is Hiro Yui, ripper of birthday party invitations and wiper of tears. It is Hiro Yui himself.
A little higher on mine. My number 4 is Shin Asuka from Seed Destiny. Probably the most abused Gundam boy in terms of how the series uses him. He's not the top for me because he does have such clear potential as a character, and there are moments where he works, which makes his ultimate abandonment by the show all the more stinging. This is the only Gundam boy who has to sit out the finale of his own show.
I will say I did not put Sheen on my list because I felt too bad for him. It was like beating a dead horse. I'm like, no, you don't. It's not your fault. So I didn't put him on my list, but I think it is fine to put him there. Obviously, in a dramatic sense, not a particularly effective Gundam boy. But my number 4 is Kamiki Sekai from Gundam Build Fighters Try, the dullest of the Gundam boys. Well, no, okay, that's not true. There are 2 duller Gundam boys on this list. But the dullest of the Build Fighter Gundam boys. But yeah, Kamiki Sekai, he's a karate boy. And that was it.
I like him fine. My number 3 is Hiro Yui from Gundam Wing, and a lot of fan fiction, as we learned on the Christmas episode.
My number 3, also from Gundam Wing, because I realized that there are a lot of Gundam, but there's more than just Hiro Yui as Gundam Boys. Gundam Wing is a cornucopia of Gundam Boys, and so my number 3 is Wanfei, the 5th of the Gundam Boys, the one that, the show forgot existed for about the whole middle 30 episodes or so. It just kind of disappears because he's so boring. He's got the worst of the Gundams of all the Gundam Wing Gundam Boys. He has no personality other than just being annoying. Wanfei, easily the worst of the Gundam Wing Gundam Boys.
That's fair, although I have to say, under these rules, then I would have to consider the other Gundam Boys from Double O for the top 10 list, and I feel like they would all be on there if I were doing it that way.
But they're not Gundam Boys, they're too old. Setsun's the only one who's an actual child.
Okay, fair enough. We should have done some ground rules on this, clearly, but this is fine. Okay, my number 2 is Riku Mikami from Gundam Build Divers, a character whose name I absolutely had to look up because he is that forgettable and then also complicit in just bad things.
Yeah, my number 2 is also Riku. I didn't even bother to look up what his last name was. I could remember that his first name was Riku. Just a vapid, empty nothing of a character. Just terrible. But he's terrible, but he's nothing.
He's nothing, yeah.
So it's like it doesn't even quite get him to number 1 because he's not even remarkable enough to be number 1 on the list, which is almost more worse in some ways.
And my number 1, and I assume your number 1, is Kira Yamato from Gundam Seed Destiny.
Yes.
Taking what was at the very least a good Gundam boy from Gundam Seed. You and I agree on that.
Yes.
And making him the villain of Seed Destiny without recognizing he was the villain of Seed Destiny, which makes you tear your fucking hair out watching the show.
Yes, Kira Yamato. Seed Destiny Kira Yamato is the worst Gundam boy because he's not supposed to be the Gundam boy anymore, but he refuses to let go of that, so he lures Sheen behind the fucking gym and beats him up and takes his Gundam boy card. Is basically what the second half of Sea Destiny feels like. It's just it is the thing that destroys. It is the fundamental thing that completely destroys Gundam Seed Destiny. And like once that transition starts to happen, that's where that show tailspins and cannot get out of it. And so, Riku is number 2 because he, is an awful character, an awful show. Yamato from Seed Destiny is number 1 because the show could have been good, but because they didn't know how to use him as a character and they just turned him into the protagonist again, weirdly, halfway through, he torpedoed a show that actually had a lot of potential.
And turn him into the protagonist by doing a bunch of things that I think are like kind of unjustifiably bad and war crimey and just not good. Completely misunderstands the actual like nuanced argument of the original Seed in terms of anti-war stuff. It's all bad.
Yeah. Very bad.
Next list. This one is so fun. It is our top 10 villains, and I'm really excited to count this one down.
This one I struggle with a little bit because I realized like Gundam it's hard to define sometimes who and who's not a villain.
That's true, yeah.
I will say I didn't consider Char in this list because I don't know if Char counts as a villain or not. I just don't know in my heart of hearts. He's like an anti-hero. I don't know. So I think that this is one that like our answers will probably differ depending on how you consider them to be a villain.
I do consider Char a villain at the end of the day because it's too hard to open up that can of worms and figure it all out. So there you go. So Char is on my list. But let's go ahead and count this one down. My number 10, this is, I think, the only thing that this show ever makes it onto a list for me, and this is Anavel Gato from Stardust Memory. Obviously gets wound up in one of the dumbest plots in all of Gundam in the final episode of Stardust Memory, but he is the best part of that show. Great vocal performance, interesting character. I wish the show were built around him. It's not... But it's enough to just inch him onto my top 10 villains list.
Yeah, that's a good example of a character that I could not in my heart of hearts call him a villain because he's right. He's too right.
He's too right. Yeah, that's fair.
Too shitty. Again, I think it's fine. Like it's very much in the eye of the beholder who doesn't count as a villain. But
he's also got a sick mobile suit.
He does.
Man, we talked about that last year. Great mobile suit.
My number 10 is this is incontrovertibly this is a fucking villain. Is the Devil Gundam from G Gundam. The Devil Gundam is fucked up. It fucking eats people. It turns them into monsters. He's trying to eat the entire planet. If you want us to get something that is irredeemably fucking evil, it is the Devil Gundam because he is the devil itself.
Fair enough. My number 9, not the devil itself, does some devilish things, but is more nuanced than that, and that is Rustal Elion from Iron-Blooded Orphans. Really, and this is the only IBO character on here. And there are a lot of antagonists in Iron-Blooded Orphans, but for instance, McGillis is one that you could, but he's not, to me, the villain of that show. Mm-hmm. There's, what's his rival's name? The character who...
Oh, Gaelio?
Yeah, Gaelio you could, but really it is Rustal Elion. But the thing that is so... When we talked about this in part 2 of our Iron-Blooded Orphan episode, what's so interesting about Rustal Elion is that he probably will wind up being a good and fairly just leader of this new society who will make it better, but he will make it better on the bodies of these fucking children. Mm-hmm. And there's a ruthlessness, but also a realness, I think a reality to that character and how actual politicians operate that makes him one of the most dynamic Gundam villains.
Yeah, I'll say he is on my list. I also consider him a villain. He's a little bit higher for me, but yes. My number 9 is Raul Lacreuze from Gundam Seed, the most just sort of spitting insane fucking Char clone. Particularly by the time you get to the end of that show, that character's gone so far off the deep end that I think it's a good example of a very entertaining villain in that last 10 episodes or so where he is just completely lost his fucking mind. I can't remember. I think it's Toshiko Seki. Yeah, that's the actor. Yeah. He just has a fucking ball playing that character in the home stretch once he doesn't have to pretend anymore to be normal.
Absolutely. My number 8 is a character you mentioned on your top 10 characters list, and that is Katagina Luz from Victory, the hero turned villain. Also, definitely a villain, I think we can say. Uh-huh. But, such a fascinating and rich and deep one, and leads to the stunning conclusion of Victory in its final scene. Obviously a great character.
Which is a little bit higher up on my list. My number 8 is Karatzo Rona, or the Iron Mask from F91. This dude is like, I mean, partially because they just ripped off Darth Vader, but he is like the villain, right? He's just like fully a villain. He makes the fucking bugs, which are some of the, like, one of the most disturbing concepts in Gundam that then later Gundam things borrow from, the like unmanned ruthless killing machines. Like, as with a lot of stuff in F91, they don't have a lot of space to fully explore Iron Mask, but he's got such a striking character design, and he has such a fucking evil plan. He's a very good villain.
I love that pick. Didn't make it onto mine, but a very cool pick. My number 7 is Paptimus Shiroko. One of the most despicable Gundam villains, one of the most unique, and one of the ones who does one of the most evil things at the end of his show to poor Camille Bidan.
He is also a little higher on my list. My number 7 is Giran Zabi, who I kind of considered as being the villain of the original Gundam. Ginga Banjo himself, just a great, hugely charismatic performance, especially when he gets to come back as the character occasionally in stuff like Origin. Just not, as much screen time as some other villains, because he's introduced relatively late, and, the main characters don't intersect with Giran directly in the show at all, but such a huge presence and casts a big shadow in the history of Gundam.
Yes. My number 6, possibly the most despicable Gundam villain. I think if we were ranking it on just pure despicability, I think Glemmy Toto from Gundam Double Zeta would be a good
pick.
He would be in the running. He's a piece of shit. He's possibly a child predator. He is bad news, and his downfall is one of the highlights of a great show. Love to hate Glemmy Toto.
I think I'll put Glemmy Toto as my number 10. I kind of didn't think about him, but that is a fantastic pick. Yeah, sorry, Devil Gundam, you're getting knocked off like Glemmy Toto. I'll just put him there at number 10, because that is a very good pick. My number 6 is Gim Gingenham from Turn A Gundam. Just such a fun character. This like war-crazed, insane dude who has no idea the consequences of what he's doing, but just wants to go fight because he's lived this like peaceful life on the moon his whole like thousands of years he's been alive or whatever with cryogenic freezing. Just a absolutely unhinged but hugely entertaining character.
Absolutely, and one where the word villain is so slippery. But he's only in near the end of Turn A, and it's hard to even say he like has like negative intent on anything, because he's basically like a toy soldier who got out,
And that's the exact thing that makes him the villain of that show.
Exactly, right? Yeah, no, totally. Great pick. My number 5 is Master Asia, who I think it's fair to call him the villain of G Gundam, a villain of G Gundam. I guess the Devil Gundam controls everything ultimately, but Master Asia is the main antagonist.
Master Asia's fighting for the planet, man. He's fighting for he loves everything too much. This is a good example of like, I couldn't even though I think it's fine to count him as a villain. I'm not like you're saying you're wrong, but for me, in my heart of hearts, I'm like, I can't put Master Asia on this list. It's like, it's just, he's too good. He's Shisho. No.
The East is burning red. Yes. That's my number 5.
My number 5, you mentioned him earlier, is Russell Elian from Iron Blooded Orphans, the most successful, if you want to call it that, villain in all of Gundam. He just wins at the end, and it's fucked up. And the thing that makes him such an effective villain, as you say, is that it's just purely realistic. That from, like, most other perspectives in that universe, most people would not look at that character as a villain, but because we're, adopting the perspective of Tekadon and them as our protagonists, he represents everything that is wrong with that, like, world and that society. Just a great, terrifying character.
My number 4 is kind of a cheat, but whatever. It's the Zabi family from Gundam 79.
Sure.
Just going to throw all the Zabis in there together. They are all villainous in different ways to different extremes, but I think you have Giran and Kycilia especially, but then you've also got Dozal, and you've got Garma, and, the whole den of vipers that tear each other apart as the original villains of Gundam 79. They're great.
Very good. My number 4 is Paptimus Shiroko from Zeta Gundam, that weird Jupiter motherfucker.
My number 3 is Ribbons Allmark. Maybe the best named Gundam villain, one of the best voiced by Toru Furuya, and just one of the most purely entertaining from Gundam 00.
My number 3 is also Ribbons Allmark. Yes,
there we go.
It's the right placement for this character. Yeah, no, I just agree with everything. It's hugely entertaining, an incredible performance. Great character, great name.
Yeah. My number 2 is Haman Karn from
My number
Double
2 is
Zeta
also Haman Karn.
Okay. There we go. Who's your number 1? Oh, I know who your number 1 is. Never mind. Okay. My number 1 is Char Aznable from Gundam.
Yes,
and Char's counterattack.
I just couldn't, in my heart of hearts, count Char, so I took him off the list for me. And my number one is Katejina-san from Victory Gundam. Just what a fucking character that is. Again, like, it was particularly when, like, doing some of the stuff for, like, we were making our, like, shows list and all that kind of stuff. I watched some clips from Victory Gundam because it'd been a while to refresh my memory, and just was like, oh my god, this character is so interesting. And yeah, I think Katejina-san is just one of the great Gundam characters, and particularly for a villains list, like, she I think embodies that. Like, she's absolutely villainous, but there's so much interesting going on with that character's psychology and what she kind of represents, opposite Uso. Great character.
I agree, and I think this is one where you having seen Victory Gundam twice gives you a little more of a perspective on it, because this is one where I suspect when I rewatch Victory Gundam, I will be fully in the same camp with you on Katejina. I think it's something that probably does benefit from seeing it twice, because...
Yes. Because there are things set up where, like... I think the thing I like about Katejina-san, this maybe will step on a question that will be later about Cyber New type stuff, but the thing I really think is interesting about her is that most Cyber New type characters... they feel like people who are good people that have been twisted because of the Cyber New type thing that have, like, made them bad. And Katejina feels like she is a person that is kind of like an awful person who knows how to hide it, and the Cyber New type thing gives her the power that she doesn't have to hide it anymore. And so it's not like, it doesn't feel to me, when you, especially on rewatching it, that she is someone that was a good person that got twisted by the Cyber New type bullshit and all that. It is that, like, that gave her the excuse to let out the things that she already was and take it to an extreme. And that's the thing that I think just makes her a really fascinating character.
Yeah, I like that explanation a lot. That makes a lot of sense. All right. Keeping on with character stuff, we next have our top 5 favorite Gundam captains.
Yes.
A list for which there is only one correct answer at the top.
Yes.
But the other 4 will be fun to hear still. So there you go. Top 5 ship captains. Do you have any like criteria for this one, Sean?
They had to be the captain of a ship.
That's, yeah, same for me. So my number 5 is the captain of the Nahel Argama, Bicha Oleg, the boy captain who winds up winning a big war for them, the one that Captain Bright trusts in, one of the coolest arcs, because he goes from almost getting everyone killed by betraying them to becoming the captain of the new Argama, and it is cool as shit, and I love that whole entire narrative move in Double Zeta so much. He's in my top 5.
Interesting. I didn't even really consider Bicha, but that is a good choice, because of course he's only captain for a section of Double Zeta, because it starts out with Bright, but yes, that's a good choice. My number 5 is Marie Ramius from Gundam Seed, voiced by Mitsubishi Kotono, Sailor Moon herself. I just think Ramius is one of those, in like a classic Gundam captain style, of which, like, they moved away from in a lot of later Gundam shows, like the AU stuff, like Gundam Wing. You don't have as much of the traditional captain. I think Ramius really kind of takes that role back and does it in a really great way.
She's my number 6, definitely my honorable mention. Didn't quite make my top 5, but good choice. My number 4 is Subaroa Zinnerman, the captain of the Garencieres. I don't know how you actually are supposed to say that. I've never figured it out. It's a very long ship name. But this is the captain from Unicorn Gundam, from the sleeves, but winds up being kind of in the middle of the conflict. Is the sort of father figure to our Puru character in that show. And one of, I think, the highlights of Unicorn Gundam as a whole.
It's not on my list, but that's a very good choice. My number 4 from Afterwar Gundam X, it's Jamil Neat, our alternate universe Amuro Ray-esque boy who ended up being the captain of his ship, which is always just like a great concept. It's one of the fun things about Afterwar Gundam X is to explore that version of a Gundam-style sequel where Amuro is a successor to Bright. And Jamil Neat, also one of my favorite Gundam names, which is a great character.
My number 3 is Jamil Neat, captain of the Frieden in Afterwar Gundam X. What a fucking character. We love him. We sung his praises. He's one of the best parts of an undersung Gundam show.
Absolutely. My number 3 is Sumeragi Lee Noriega from 00 Gundam. She's interesting because she's like not as traditional a captain of the ship, particularly early on when their like celestial being is just like kind of doing as like according to plan. But so she's more of like the tactics lady. But as the series goes on and they go more rogue, she slowly becomes more of like the active captain. I think she has one of like the most compelling character arcs of any of the captain characters, particularly like as with the captains that are supporting characters in their shows. She's got a really powerful arc in 00.
My number 2 is Sumeragi Lee Noriega, captain of the Ptolemaeus in Double O. Very clear number 2 for me, for the reasons you said. Just such a, she's the captain character, but not in the bright Noah archetype at all. Has such an interesting character arc. So many unique things about her. I love all of the tactics side of Double O, which flows through her. Just amazing character.
Interesting. My number 2 is Orga Itsuka from Iron-Blooded Orphans. The trick of IBO is that they took the protagonist role and they split it across 2 figures, the Gundam boy and the captain, instead of making the captain a supporting character. And Orga's my boy. He's the Dancha.
For whatever reason, I didn't consider him the captain because he's the head of the whole organization, I guess.
He's also the captain of the ship?
He is, but sometimes he's not on the ship, and then there's the other guy who just captains the ship, isn't there?
Yeah, but the captain isn't always the only person who's giving orders. Sometimes captains
That's fair
are
enough.
on the ship and other people have to take the helm. He's definitely the captain of that ship.
He is, I think, because of his broader role in the organization. I didn't consider him for this list, but I understand the logic, and he would be deserving of the number 2 slot, definitely.
Because also, if you're looking at it more of like the less of the specific, are they literally captaining the ship at every moment, and more like what is the role they fill in a Gundam archetype sense? Like their Orga is very clearly the captain character archetype.
That's fair enough.
Like larger import in the scope of the show.
Interesting. But yeah, just wanted to be clear, not on my list, not because he's not deserving, just wasn't how I thought about it. And our number 1 is Captain Bright.
Captain Bright, yep.
Captain of the White Base, the Argama, the Ra Kylum, and probably other ships we don't even know about.
Yes, he is the Gundam captain.
Yep.
Like there's nothing you want more in Gundam than to hear Hirotaka Suzuki just shout like, fire that barrage, or it's like full speed ahead. Just like you just want all those like hard commander lines from Captain Bright, always just like a huge stand up shout moment. It's just he creates the mold that all the other captains try to fill.
And he slaps people.
Yes, he slaps them, and he slaps them a lot.
Yep. This is a list I am super excited for, Sean. This is the top 5 Char clones.
Yes. This is another list that's like gets into this like definitional question of like what is and isn't a Char clone to you? Are they a Char clone if they wear a mask? Like does there have to be something more? This was a hard one for me to kind of work out for myself. Where do things lie?
So I defined this, and I defined like the best Char clones as, for me, how interestingly they play with the Char archetype. So I don't consider the characters who just have a mask but nothing else, like Harry Ord. Harry Ord, great character, not a top 5 Char clone to me because he has no other Char qualities. Full Frontal, I really love in Unicorn, but as a literal Char clone voiced by Shuichi Ikeda, that felt a little too close to the source, like a little unfair to include him. So my top 5 wound up being more, what are they doing with the Char, typography that is an interesting, evolution or play on that. And that's kind of how I decided this.
I didn't go quite that perspective. Mine is more like how much of the Char clone are they? Like how much of like how close are we getting there, and how are they replicating it? And also like, is it effective? Obviously, it can't just be like, is it a guy who kind of looks like Char or whatever? But yeah, I also did not count like Harry Ord. Did not really was not really considered. Like Chronicle Asher from Victory Gundam to me is like, is that really a Char clone? He's just a dude who has a white mask on. So that's kind of, I took like how much of a Char clone is he kind of is sort of how I interpreted top 5.
Yeah. So with that in mind, my number 5 is the most self-conscious of all the Char clones, and that is Captain Mask from G-Reco. Just named Captain Mask. He is more than just a person in a mask, because he is also someone with a sort of dual hidden identity, otherwise fairly different than Char, but such a fun, conscious play on that, and a character who sort of is very noble, who gets wrapped up in the story that he is writing for himself in G-Reco, until at the end of the show runs out of narrative and doesn't know what to do, and just a great, fascinating character in a really cool mobile suit.
Yeah, I like Mask a lot. He wasn't enough cloney for me to quite make the top 5 Char clones. But I think by your metrics, I think that works very well. My number 5, A character that is so Char cloney, it's very much to his own detriment, is from Gundam Wing Zex Marquise, who is a character that felt like initially wasn't supposed to be that much of a Char clone, like evoke some of it, and then by the end that they decided to just randomly do Char's entire plot line from Mobile Suit Gundam, Zeta Gundam, and Char's Counterattack all scrunched into one TV show that already has 5 protagonist characters, also has to juggle. But they sure tried to make him as Char-like as possible, as frenetically as possible. So it would feel almost like rude not to at least put him on this list.
Not on mine, because I think he winds up being a very boring Char clone.
He is that's why he's at the bottom of my list, but he's a boring Char clone. But man, is he a fucking Char clone, for sure.
My number 4, this it's hard to say where this fits in the Char clone pantheon, but I think it's such a fun explosion of the idea. I'm going with Meijin Kawaguchi from Gundam.
My number
Build
4
Fighters.
is also Meijin Kawaguchi.
There we go. Yes.
Even though we're looking at these lists in totally different ways, we still got the same placement.
He is a person with like a dual identity, obviously. He's got a mask, and he is big, flashy character in a red Zaku, all of that stuff, right?
Yeah,
and of course,
rival character.
He's the rival.
Fulfills that role really well.
And also just one of the most entertaining things Gundam has ever fucking come up with.
Yeah, and then for my list and my reasoning with him is that he is like intentionally making himself like a Char clone, right? Because he is in and of himself knowledgeable of the world and tropes of Gundam, so he is actively leaning into that identity and doing it knowingly, and so he is consciously styling himself after Char, and is extremely entertaining in doing so.
Yes, absolutely. My number 3 is Zehart Galette from Gundam Age. This is such a great character, one of the best parts of Age. We meet him in the second arc, and then he goes through the end of the series. A character who doesn't start out strictly as a Char clone. He starts out as this sort of childhood friend of Asano, and then Asano, and then we move on through his life as he becomes sort of the military leader of the Martians, and he puts on the mask and he tries to close off his humanity, and he has this relationship with Asamu and this friendship. Just a phenomenal character, and I think a really fun building out of the sort of Char archetype where we see other sides of him on either side of putting on the mask.
I think that is a very good choice. It did not quite make my list, but I like it. My number 3 is McGillis Farid from Iron-Blooded Orphans. I think the thing about McGillis that is really interesting is that I think you on the outset, I think you think that he's not really going to be that much of a Char clone, and just on the outside be a Char clone. Early on, it feels like they're just they put him in a mask one time. He's a hot blonde dude, and he's kind of a rivalish character, so he's the Char of the show, but probably not that much. And then the more you learn about the character, I think the more you realize, no, he actually is a really good Char clone, and that it's like a well-observed version of a lot of the psychology of Char and a lot of what Char actually represents beneath the surface, and not just it's a hot blonde dude wearing a mask who's mysterious and cool. And the deeper you get in, and the more you kind of explore the insecurities of McGillis and where he comes from in the world, and how kind of like out of place he is, the more of an effective like Char clone that he really is, and how much he reflects, I think, a lot of the interesting narrative ideas that Char actually represents, and not just the symbol that Char wears on top of him. So McGillis Farid is my number 3.
Maybe we'll hear about him later. My number 2 is Graham Aker slash Mr. Bushido, the character who does not start out as a Char clone, but once he gets his ass kicked, well, not really, he gets his ass kicked, but he also kicks some ass at the end of that first season, becomes Mr. Bushido, and then is kind of forgotten intentionally because he is in his own narrative headspace where he gets to be the cool rival captain, and Setsuna is in a narrative headspace of, Jesus Christ, there's crazy shit going on, I have to stop, I do not have time for you, crazy Bushido guy. We love Graham Aker, wonderful character. Nakamura Yuichi, he's great.
Yeah, I love Mr. Bushido. I didn't put him on my list because I think he's not as much of a clone, but I do think that I think he fits well on your list and your criteria. My number 2, very much a Char clone and also very entertaining, we talked about it a little bit earlier, is Raul Creuset, who is literally a clone. He's not obviously Char doesn't exist in that universe, but he is a clone. And he evokes so much of the effective, actual Char characterization while still being able to be his own character. But he is a character who is, angry about the fact that he is himself a clone, and both I think literally in that universe and also like representationally in the scope of Gundam, there's a little bit of like a meta element to the way that he's characterized in that sense. And I think Raul Cruz is interesting because you had characters like Zex that are these very ineffective versions of Char clones, or you have characters like Chronicle Asher that like have the symbolism of Char with the mask but don't actually reflect anything of the characterization. And Raul Cruz taking the Char clone idea very seriously is very effective, and I think he works well as a character. And he is very much a clone of Char.
What about the guy from Gundam Seed Destiny?
Raise a Barrel.
Yeah.
Didn't quite make the cut. We have a name list later that he was very close to making my name list because I do love Raise a Barrel as a name, but he's not as good as a Char clone.
No. I mean the guy who dies in a thermonuclear explosion and then comes back with a mask and becomes the Char clone. Yeah, Mulaflaga.
Roanoke. Yeah. That's not a Char clone.
I think it very much is, and it's a problem in that fucking terrible show. All right, my number one, I don't even see how this is an argument. McGillis Farid is the best and most interesting Char clone for the reasons you were outlining earlier, Sean. We talked about this on the Iron-Blooded Orphans episode. There is no character who is made in the mold of Char who I think more interestingly plays with the actual depths of the Char archetype, not just the surfaces. And I know that because he really only wears the mask a little bit in the first season, but his most interesting Char clone aspects are in the second season, where you see this sort of impotent rage under the surface about what was taken from him and a lack of knowledge about how the world actually works that leads him to doom. And what a phenomenal character this is.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic, great character. And under your criteria, I think that is the right number one. Like, that is the most interesting usage of the Char iconography and elements of Char as a character in a non-Char TV show. But my number one is Full Frontal, who is the best Char clone because he's a clone of Char.
That makes sense. He is the most Char clone.
Yes, he is a clone of Char. If you ask me to make a list of the top 5 Char clones, well, there's only one literal Char clone, and how is he not number one? I don't know. The list of Char clones that doesn't put the Char clone at number one is confusing to me.
All right. Sean, the next list on here is top 10 names, but I think we should save that for the end of the lists because it's so fun.
Yes.
I think we need to make that our grand finale here.
That works for me.
So let's skip down and let's do the top 5 Haros. So, or Haros.
Haros, yeah. I don't know what that pronunciation was. I found it very harrowing.
What are our 5 favorite Haro? Sean, why don't you kick us off? What is your 5th favorite Haro in the Gundam universe?
My number 5 was the evil Haro from Build Divers. It's a good bit. It's the only thing that I will give Build Divers on any of these lists. In a positive way, is that I think having the evil Haro is fun, and the animators have a lot of fun with that. So I put it at number 5.
I'm going to be honest, I forgot about that because I just wasn't even thinking of Gundam Build Divers, but it is a good use of Haro. My number 5 is Lacus. It's not Lacus's Haro army. Why did I get that wrong? It's the Haro army from Gundam Seed. Who's the character who actually has all the Haros?
Yeah.
Oh, it is Lacus? Okay.
Othron is the one who makes them, but he gives them to Lacus.
Yeah, Lacus has the Haros. Yes, Lacus Klein's Haro army from Gundam Seed. Also the stars of the Gundam Seed eye catches. Just a veritable army of small Haros who all bounce around. Not my favorite ever use of Haro, but enough for the top 5. It's probably the most Haro.
That might be higher up on my list.
Okay. What's your number 5? You already did your number 5.
Yes.
So what's your number 4?
My number 4 is OG Haro from Original Gundam. This is the template of Haro. This is Haro used purely as a mascot character in the way that Haro is used in most Gundam shows as a purely mascot style character that's there for some light comic relief. And so, I kind of bundled in, you can vaguely bundle in like Zeta Gundam and Double Zeta and all this sort of like standard usage of Haro. But I think OG Haro is the best usage of Haro in that sense. Also because I really like the original sort of conception of the character that's been sort of retconned of being built by Amuro and how that kind of reflects things about his character. I think it's very important in that original show. That adds more of a dramatic quality to OG Haro than he has in something like Zeta or Double Zeta, where he's more there just purely for comic relief.
My number 4, this is from something we haven't reviewed on the show, but it had to be here if we're doing top 5 Haros, and this is Barrow Rona's Haro Parrot from Crossbone Gundam. She has a mechanical parrot on her shoulder and names it Haro, and it says Gundam catchphrases. If you haven't read the Crossbone Gundam manga, this is one reason to do it. Haro is a parrot now, and that is a just phenomenal use of the Haro archetype.
Yeah, I didn't even think of that one, but that's a very good pick.
Yeah.
My number 3 is Lock-On Stratus's Haro from Double O Gundam. This is one of the most prominent uses of Haro, right? Because it helps him lock on and fight enemies and do all of his crazy sniper stuff. I like this Haro is handed down from Lyle to Neil, his brother, in season 2. And is just like a good, effective, actual characterization and usage Haro directly in the show, a dramatic sense, and not just as comic relief.
Yes. Not on mine, but I definitely considered it. Excellent use of Haro. My number 3 is Nobel from G-Reco. The Haro it's not technically a Haro, but
Sure.
It's a Haro. And it is on my list, and it is a wonderful update of the Haro, mascot archetype, and also transforms into all sorts of cool things. So Nobel, love him.
I didn't really consider that because I was looking purely for, is this a Haro? But I think it's fine for your list that you put it on there, but it didn't.
Nobel is a Haro. It's like saying that man is a Char. Even if it's not named Char, it's a Haro.
Sure, yeah. For your criteria, your list works. My number 2 is Victory Gundam Haro. This is the most dramatic use of a Haro, the most active use of a Haro directly in the drama of a show. And so if you're looking for that, like, this is the best use of Haro in that sense. And then also really great eye catch. The eye catch of Haro becoming gigantic in the size of the fucking planet. That's a good, just like, every episode you just get that little extra piece of Haro in Flanders the dog, building up over the course of that show. It's very good.
My number 2 is the OG Haro from First Gundam. For all the reasons you said, Sean, great use of a mascot. I really love the characterization it gives to Amuro, and then the relationship it forms with Frau and with the war orphans, Kika, Katz, and Letz. But really the reason it rose this high for me is having shown the 3 original Gundam movies to my students in that giant robots class and seeing those in an auditorium of 60, 70 people. Haro's just a hit. Haro's just a crowd pleaser. Haro, people laugh when Haro's on screen. I think when you see it with an audience, you realize there is a certain pressure valve function that Haro and a couple other characters serve on original Gundam that is very needed, and I think you can feel tension released by the audience when Haro comes on screen and says, like, Amuro, something like that. People love it.
Yeah, no, it's a great, very funny character. But I think that there is one use of Haro that is even funnier and is my favorite Haro, and that's Gundam Seed Haro or the Lacus Klein Haros. I think that they are incredibly funny. I love here's this weird ball robot bouncing around in the back of scenes, just screaming rude shit at the top of his lungs. The Gundam Seed Haros are voiced by Mitsubishi Kotono, who's also the Captain Ramius in that show, and then Sailor Moon, so on and so forth. And she just really leans into this very harsh high yell that character has. And so when you give me a list of top 5 Haros, the thing I immediately thought of off the top of my head was just Lacus's Haro bouncing around, just yelling, "Mitome Takanai! Mitome Takanai!" And Lacus trying to shut it up, and other people being like, what the fuck is going on? And a while ago, I saw a clip online of a radio show that they did contemporaneous to the release of Gundam Seed. While that show was airing, they did radio shows, as is common, with voice actors, and there was an episode that had Mitsubishi Kotono on it, and she talked about playing the Haro characters, and she talked about that the director had a whole backstory about how Lacus programmed them with this and all this stuff, and it was very interesting hearing her talk about the things going through her head as she's just shouting rude shit in Japanese at people as this little robot, and nobody knows what to do about it. It is not the most dramatic use of a Haro, but it is the funniest use of a Haro, and so that's why I give Gundam Seed Haro my number 1.
I went in the very opposite direction, and I went for the most just scarring, fucked up use of a Haro, and so my number 1 is Uso Ewin's battle-hardened Haro, who definitely developed robo-PTSD from Victory Gundam. The only Haro who has committed at least one war crime, because Haro fires the trigger on a big space laser at some point. That Haro goes through some shit, by far the most active in the plot. That Haro, man, that is, if you want a sign of Tomino's deep depression at that period in his life, turning Haro the mascot into a weapon of mass destruction, it gives you that.
It does give you that. Good Haro.
Next one. This is a big list, Sean.
Yes.
The top 10 seiyuu performances or vocal performances in the Mobile Suit Gundam franchise. This was hard. I will say it's largely but not entirely characters who were in my top 10, but there are a couple that are different.
Yeah, the way I took the list was to try to avoid it from being an excessive overlap. I tried to go and really think about, like, how much of an impact does the performance have on the character and everything, and not just, like, do they have, like, big character arcs and, like, a lot of lines and stuff. And then also, like, what are interesting challenges that, like, characters had for, like, voice actors to overcome that I think helped me get a little bit more variety on my list. And I also tried to make it, like, specific so that, like, it's a specific performance and not just, like, oh, they played this character for 50,000 years, and I tried to narrow it down to make it as specific as possible to avoid as much overlap as I can, even though there is, like, half the list does overlap.
Interesting. Okay. So, yeah, I don't know if I thought about it that deeply, but I think that makes sense. So, yeah. I am happy then to share my list. I can start with my number 10 is Toshio Furukawa as Kai Shiden from Original Gundam. And I will say, this one is here because of those screenings I mentioned earlier where I watched Gundam with my class. Mm-hmm. And Kai fucking killed every line, every time he's on screen. Kai made people laugh. Some of that is the animation is great, but a lot of it is just Toshio Furukawa, who my students would also then go on to see in Pat Labor, who he's the main character in the first Pat Labor movie and in the original TV show. Obviously love Toshio Furukawa. He's also Piccolo. He's a legend. But Kai Shiden, it is such a good comedy performance that then makes that pivot in the infamous episode where Miharu dies. Mm-hmm. Just turns on a dime into a beautiful dramatic performance. This one, when I thought about it and I thought about those reactions in the theater watching those movies, Toshio Furukawa got onto my top 10 for that alone.
It's, obviously great legendary performance. It did not make the cut for me, but a great performance. My number 10 is Mitsushi Kotono as Iori Rinko, or Sei's mom, in Gundam Build Fighters. Mitsushi Kotono, of course, has been on Gundam a lot. She was the blonde girl, I think, Talia, something like that. I can't remember the character's name. And after Gundam X, she's the blonde girl who's one of the main crew of the ship. She's, of course, Captain Ramius in Gundam Seed. You know, she's also Misato in Neon Genesis Evangelion. She's Sailor Moon. She's in a million things. One of the great actresses and voice actresses in Japan. But the reason why I specifically credit Sei's mom is because when I think about how big of a shadow that character casts and how popular that character is, so much of it is because her performance is so fucking good. Not in a way that's, like, big, dramatic, you know, she doesn't have a huge character arc, she doesn't have, like, very deep dramatic scenes, but she infuses that character with so much life and so much energy that even though she's not in the show that much, really, everybody knows that character. Everybody who's seen Gundam Build Fighters, she's one of their favorite characters. Like, she's one of the most popular characters in the build stuff on our podcast and online. It's because, like, her performance is so fucking good and so full of life, and it's like, you know, it's a character that you didn't need to go that hard in on, but she goes so hard on and just makes her incredibly likable. So that's why I put that as my number 10.
Wonderful. My number 9 is Daisuke Namikawa as Al in War in the Pocket. This is such a special performance, because if you don't know, Daisuke Namikawa has become, as now a 46-year-old man, one of the biggest voice actors in the business. You know, he is Yu Narukami in Persona 4, which we love. He is Captain Kidd in One Piece. He is the modern voice of Goemon Ichikawa in the Lupin series. Huge
voice
actor. And this was one of, if not his first, vocal, I think his first starring role in anything as a child.
In anime, yes.
In anime, yes.
In like he did a lot of, like, dubs of Western movies and stuff like that.
Right. Yeah. So he has been a voice actor since he was a kid. And this is just such a special performance where you have an actual kid voicing a kid in an anime, which is actually a fairly rare thing. Like, the Ghibli movies do it. Some TV shows will do it, but it's a hard thing to get right, and they got it right. It is such a special performance, and it also being sort of, an early kickoff point for someone who has become a big part of the anime industry. I just think it's such a cool thing to have happened, And it is one of the things that makes War in the Pocket as special as it is that it's an actual kid doing the voice, and it is a truly tremendous performance.
Yeah, I agree. He is also on my list a little bit higher up, and so yes, 100%. Absolutely agree. My number 9 is Tanaka Rie as Lacus Klein / Mir Campbell in Gundam Seed and in Seed Destiny. This is like one of the only things I will give Seed Destiny credit for is Mir Campbell is a very effective character. It is like one of the only things that show actually has this like a good idea that it sets up, it builds, it executes on, and it works all the way through. And a lot of his Tanaka Rie's performance is so good. Like her performance as Lacus Klein is already fantastic, and it's very layered and it's very sort of subdued, but incredibly effective. But it's particularly when they moved into See Destiny, and now she's asked to play a second role. That is, Mir Campbell is like the girl who's being turned in, like trying to be turned into another Lacus Klein that is more useful to like the state propaganda machine. And it's so effective that I remember when we talked about it, Jonathan, you didn't even realize it was the same actress, and you thought it was someone trying to sound like Tanaka Rie as Lacus Klein, because she finds such a perfect range to play that character to make it feel that way, because that's what the character is someone trying to sound like Lacus Klein and not necessarily knowing entirely how to do it, and her identity slowly being consumed by that performance. And it's such a sharp, nuanced role in a show for See Destiny that otherwise like does not do much well. Like, I think they actually give her a lot of really good material, and Tanaka Rie, who's an incredible actress, like knocks it absolutely out of the park. So it's like that combined with having to do all the Lacus stuff. I think it's a hugely impressive performance in Gundam, and so it's my number 9.
Excellent. My number 8, speaking of like double roles, this is one where just the character looms so large and the task of the character is so big that I feel like the actor just has to be on the list, and that is Reiko Takahashi as Diana and Kihel in Turn A Gundam. You know, there are a lot of things that go into making that character work, but the fact that which is one of the many performances in that show that was from a relative unknown, new actor, and there is that kind of unvarnished quality to it, but playing two characters who essentially become each other, you know, it's an incredible piece of work.
Absolutely. This is also on my list. My number 8 is Masashi Hirose as Mr. Ral, is specifically what I'm, obviously Rama Ral as well, but Mr. Ral is the performance I'm crediting in Gundam Build Fighters, because it's the funniest performance in Gundam. It is, full stop, like, it is the funniest performance, and it is like, it is just an absolutely magical performance, and it's one of those things that, you know, the recast works fine for Build Fighters Try. Masashi Hirose kind of retired, but it is one of those things that hurts Build Fighters Try, is that they lose that like sort of comic heart at the center of the show that Mr. Ral had in the original. And it's just like you could not have that character on screen and not have you be smiling while listening to that character talk 100% of the time. And so Masashi Hirose has played like a dozen characters over the course of Gundam. Like, obviously he's best known for Rama Ral. He's in like every show in the 90s playing some character in Gundam. But Mr. Ral, as sort of effectively his last performance, I think was his best, like, just absolutely incredible comic performance.
So I don't have Masashi Hirose on my list, and part of that is because of the number of characters he played, and that Ramba Ral now has been voiced by several characters, but obviously very deserving. I went with a different comedy performance from Build Fighters for that slot, but I completely love that he's on your list, and we get to give him that shout out, because yes, it is one of the most special parts of that show, is that you have this guy who voiced this character 30 years earlier coming back and doing a comedy version of it. I mean, what a great career send-off, you know?
Yeah.
It's awesome. My number 6 is also from Turn A Gundam, and it's Romy Park as Lauren and Laura. Obviously another amazing sort of dual role, because it has to navigate the two sides of it. And also kind of in the Daisuke Namikawa zone, you know, this is ground zero for Romy Park, the sensation, you know, and the legend, and this is her first big starring role. It's a very sort of, you know, unvarnished, you know, younger performance, but where you hear a lot of what is going to make Romy Park one of the biggest, you know, voice actors of the 2000s in there. And what a just sensationally, prescient piece of casting on Tomino's part to get Romy Park at that moment in time, in the same way that getting Toru Furuya and Shuichi Ikeda in 79 was. You know, it's really incredible.
Yeah, I'll say that was one of the. She's not on my list here. It's like one of the hardest cuts I had. Is that if I had like a number 11, it would be Remy Park as Lauren for all the things you're saying. Like it is an amazing performance that like is kind of unbelievable as an early like first starring role. One of the only like earliest roles that she has. Yeah, it's incredible.
And correct me if I'm wrong. Is that the only Gundam boy voiced by a woman?
It depends on if you count Sei and Reiji. Who are both
that's true. They are
women.
Yeah. And I always forget because it's so convincing there. Obviously, part of the entire trick of Turn A is that you're not entirely meant to forget that it's voiced by a woman, I think. Like, I think it's a very important and intentional thing. And it's the kind of thing that you would never get in English because we just don't do that with, like, a teenage character or an adult character have, like, a gender-swapped casting. It's one of the wonderful things about anime, and it's a great performance.
Definitely.
So that's my number 6.
See, you're number 6 because I'm on my number 7. Is that how that would work out?
What happened?
Did you skip
sorry, no. Sorry, my numbers are wrong. Romy Park was my number 7.
Okay.
The numbers on this one I wrote by hand, and I fucked it up. So there you go. Sorry about that.
Yeah, sometimes just let the computer do it.
Yeah.
My number 7, you already talked about, is Namikawa Daisuke as Al in War in the Pocket. Just an amazing performance. Again, like when he was a kid, he was like a legendary performer. Like he did the voice of the main kid in E.T. and stuff like that. So in like Western film dubs, he was very prominent and like well known as a sort of like prodigy kind of young actor. But he didn't do anime stuff when he was a little kid. So I believe War in the Pocket was either the first or one of the first anime roles he ever did. And then of course now he's still known and like now his career is in like a very different stage or whatever as like an adult actor in his 40s. But yeah, Al is just an amazing performance and a rare, like, actual child performance that they, like, ask a lot of. This is not a sort of, like, easy role where you're just sort of doing a couple of emotions. Like, Al's a really complex character that's the heart of a very complicated, very dark story. So it's like, every time I watch War in the Pocket, I'm kind of blown away by how good that performance is. And you forget, basically, that, oh, that's actually, like, an 8-year-old or 10-year-old kid in that booth doing this performance is a thing that just, like, you forget about because it seems like that would be impossible to get a kid to give a performance that good.
Yeah. My number 6, my actual number 6, sorry about the numbering snafu, is my favorite comedy performance in Gundam, and that is Minami Fuji as Mao Yasuka in Gundam Build Fighters, the funniest Kansai accent I have ever heard in anything. Mao very nearly made my character top 10. And when I was making the lists, I realized the reason Mao was making my character top 10 very nearly was because of that vocal performance, so it wound up pretty high on here. It is a work of absolute fucking art. It is so funny. I love Mao, and I love Minami Fuji in this role.
Yeah, did not make my list, but it is a really great performance. As you say, like, so much of what makes that character so memorable is how good that Kansai accent and all that stuff is. Yeah. My number 6 is Ueda Reina as Gigi Andalucia in Gundam Hathaway. Gundam Hathaway is like a get the voice actors to show off movie to me. Like I struggled for a while on whether it would be Ueda Reina or Ono Kensho who plays Hathaway. Of course, also like Junichi Suabe who plays the Federation officer in that show, which is like kind of like the 3 leads. It's just all of those performances are so striking. But I think at the end of the day, Ueda Reina as Gigi has like the heaviest load and the most complicated role to play because Gigi is such an odd character that is very hard to grasp. It's hard to kind of get the sense of exactly where is this character? Is she like incredibly wise and sharp? Is she actually like naive and just kind of like putting on these things? She has this very sort of fluid quality to her that the more you try to kind of grasp the character, the more they slip out of your fingers. And I think Ueda Reina just sort of embodies that character with so much mystery and so much intrigue while always making it feel like that that there's a lot going on behind what that character's facade is. And it's just I think it's just an all-time great performance and it's hugely sort of complex in what it does. And when, for a lot of the other performances that I'm ranking this against are performances in like big TV shows where the characters have lots of material. This is just like one movie, but even in just that like performance in one movie, she just gets so much mileage out of. I think it's just like an incredible performance.
I totally agree, and I very much considered Hathaway performances, and I wound up thinking I want to see the rest of the trilogy before I would kind of rank it. But I think your reasoning is absolutely spot on, and I think of the 3, for the first movie, for what we have so far, I think that's the correct choice.
Yeah.
Although Ono Kensho, always fantastic. My number 5, one of my favorite voice actors, Mamoru Miyano as Setsuna F. Seiei. I knew Mamoru Miyano from this period primarily as Light Yagami, which is probably his most famous role in the West. I say probably, it is. Yes, Light Yagami's a pretty famous character. And it's so funny because Setsuna starts from a similar place, which is using that very quiet vocal control that Miyano has. And Setsuna almost never goes to the places that like Light goes to, where he gets very big. And Setsuna mostly stays in this very small range where Miyano doesn't put out a whole ton of vocal bandwidth in creating the character, and it is a role so built on vocal nuance, and I think it sells the character so completely and so beautifully. I was looking at, for whatever reason, I don't remember why, I was looking at the Wikipedia page for Setsuna F. Seiei, and they have this whole part about, like, reception of the character, and, a lot of these on Wikipedia are not very well sourced, and this one isn't either, but I thought something that was interesting here that I saw was that they noted that Setsuna is a very beloved character in Japan, which he is. We noted earlier he's in the top 10 poll, all of that. And they said, but there were a lot of English critics who criticized the character, and I looked at that and I was like, why would that be? And I realized, because they don't have Mamoru Miyano. And the guy who voices him is Brad Swaley, who also voiced Light. I guess he must do all the Mamoru Miyano parts. And he's a decent actor, but he's not Mamoru Miyano. And I've heard some clips of Setsuna in English, and I can actually understand how if you don't have the specific performance Miyano or an actor of his fucking caliber is giving, that character is harder to sell. And so I think what he is doing to sell this really complicated Gundam boy, this really complicated version of, I don't even want to say version of the archetype, because he is so different from other ones we've seen, the character kind of falls apart. And I think there is just, you cannot praise Miyano enough for what he does in that show.
Yeah, it is very slightly higher on my list, so yes, I agree with absolutely everything there. Great performance. Yeah. My number 5 is Sakakibara Yoshiko as Haman Khan. I specifically put Gundam Double Zeta, but really it's like Gundam Zeta, both of those together. This is one of those where, like, kind of like Mitsushi Kotono's Yori Rinko, like, Haman Karn does not have that much screen time when you really look at it. She has more in Double Zeta, but even then, not that much. And how huge of a fucking shadow that character casts on the franchise. She's one of the most beloved characters, as we noted. Like, she's one of the top 10 characters in Japan in that poll. Like, hugely beloved, massively popular character. A character so popular that, like, there's a manga currently running in Japan that is like this weird, like, what if Haman Karn was in like a 30-something office worker in modern day Japan? Like,
yes, just, I've seen this.
Yeah, just like bizarre shit like that. But like, she's just like a iconic character. And for a character that has so little screen time, that has so much presence, it's like, it's Sakakibara Yoshiko. Like, it's her voice and her performance and all of the weight and charisma that she imbues that character with is so titanic. It's also an amazing character design. I think the character design is a big part of what also makes that character so striking. But it's Sakakibara Yoshiko's voice is just, like, I think it awakens and like inspires something in you that, like, you just like want to follow this person even if you know that it's like wrong and that you're like going to this like very fashy side. It's like, yeah, but it's Haman fucking Karn. Like, come on, like she she says go, and like, I'm gonna fucking go do it. There was a clip I saw online of this was like a long time ago. I saw this clip in my YouTube recommendations. That was a radio show that the actor Hiroshi Kamiya was on. I can't remember. There was another voice actor who's one of his friends, and they did like a podcast or something together. And as a joke for his birthday, the host of the podcast had Sakakibara Yoshiko record lines as Haman Karn and play them for Hiroshi Kamiya, who's a massive Gundam nerd, who played like Zehart and Tieria in 00 and stuff like that. And it was like, you heard these lines where she says like his name and does some like Gundam jokes and stuff, and it's like, oh my god, there's so much weight to this performance. It is incredible. Even just used in this like dumb comic sense, it's like it feels like listening to it is just having like anvils dropped on you with how heavy that performance feels and how effective it is. And so that's why it is my number 5. I just think it's like just such a fucking incredible performance for a character that is not in that series really all that much.
Yeah, I left her off my list in an effort to kind of branch out a little more from who is in my top 10 characters, and I felt like there were a couple of vocal performances I had a slightly more personal connection with, but, you know, in a grand sense, she is one of the top 10 Gundam vocal performances. And that manga you're referencing, Sean, the English title is Around 30 Office Worker Haman-sama. That is a fantastic idea for a manga, and I would love to read that. It started in November 2020 in Gundam Ace, and that is a great idea for a Gundam manga.
Everybody loves Haman Karn.
That would be a great name for a show. It's like Everybody Loves Raymond. Everybody loves Haman-sama. All right. My number 4, Hirotaka Suzuoki as Captain Bright. He was the voice of Gundam for a very long time. He said the stuff in the original Gundam. He did the next episode previews, all of that stuff. He said the episode titles. It's Hirotaka Suzuoki. He gives you the corrections. He's the captain.
Yes. Gundam Daiichi ni Tatsu. Like, you do start with,
yes.
It's just straight up Gundam Captain Bright. Yeah. My number 4, you just talked about him, is Miyano Mamoru as Setsuna F-Sei in Gundam 00. I just kind of echo everything you said. He acts within this very narrow range because that's what's appropriate for the character, and how much depth is within that range is unbelievable. It's like, it's a fucking magic act, basically, of acting. And that Setsuna never even really leaves that range that much. It just becomes nuanced within this very narrow emotional bandwidth he gives him. And it's like, of that kind of character, it's like one of the best performances ever. It's amazing.
My number 3 is Toru Furuya as Ribbons Allmark in Gundam 00. One of the best villains, one of the best performances. I will not, until I am riddled with dementia, forget the moment when I realized that Toru Furuya was the voice of Ribbons Allmark in the second season, because I tweeted something and you tweeted, "Jonathan, are you being serious?" or something to that effect, and made me look it up and realize, Jesus Christ, that's Amuro as the villain of this show, doing the most bonkers, wonderful villain voice I have ever heard. Jesus Christ, what a thing. Had to be in the top 3. Oh boy, Toru Furuya-san, what a performance.
I'll say that we may have thought of the same thing together, because that might also be somewhere on my spot. My number 3, one you talked about earlier, is Takashi Hideko as Diana Soleil / Kielheim in Turn A Gundam. Just one of the most impressive things about it is that Takashi Hideko didn't do much in terms of like anime voice acting before this character, and didn't do much after. I don't know like anything about like the rest of her career and like other stuff she did. I have no idea, but like, to just kind of come in, give this incredible performance in this amazing show where she's asked to play 2 characters, and do all of that, and then like just kind of leave it there as like this like weird sort of like masterclass of acting, and just like, at least in the anime world, not have anything else there. Again, she might do like a bunch of like dubs and stuff. I have no idea. Like, that stuff's very hard to find in the English internet. But it's an amazing performance. It's like kind of to me a kind of legendary performance that, as we talked about in the character section, is like the backbone of Turn A Gundam, which is the other best Gundam show. So it needs to be somewhere in the top 10.
My number 2 is also Toru Furuya, playing Amuro Ray in all the Gundams up to Kukuru's Dohan's Island, the new movie, where he continues to be amazing. It's just one of the seminal vocal performances in the history of anime. Absolutely.
My number 2 is Sogetsu Noboru, who played Ribbons Allmark in Gundam 00. You said Toru Furuya. I don't know who this guy. He sounds a lot like Toru Furuya. If you do the credits and you listen to some of the stuff, like interviews and stuff, it definitely was this guy Sogetsu Noboru. Now, for people who don't remember, like, that was like the whole joke they played to keep the identity secret, is there was this weird pseudonym. There is a Twitter account for Sogetsu Noboru that Toru Furuya, or like someone working for him, still maintains, and it's the funniest thing in the world. But yes, I didn't put Amuro on here because I didn't want to credit the same dude twice, so this is obviously standing in also for Amuro, broadly speaking. But I think like there is something unfucking believable about his performance as Ribbons. That as good as the Amuro stuff is, and the Amuro stuff is one of the best performances in anime, the Ribbons thing is even more impressive to me, because it's just like, how the fuck have I heard this guy not just in in Gundam, but in Dragon Ball and in Saint Seiya and in this and that and the other thing and Sailor Moon and like everything, you know? He was in every fucking anime in the 80s playing a main character. And then you get him playing this villain, and he's not doing that much to change the voice, and yet it is completely unrecognizable. And I think everybody who's a Gundam fan who watched Gundam 00 had that moment at some point, realizing there's something about this voice, but I cannot place it. And then eventually look it up, or someone tells you, and your whole mind is fucking blown. It's just incredible. I don't know if I've ever seen a performance that quite does that it almost feels weaponized for the sake of the character to have this uncanny quality to the voice based on your familiarity with the franchise. Amazing. Obviously, all the other Amuro stuff, also incredible, but specifically the ribbons thing is that what I give it. Almost in a, like, you know, Academy Award, person got snubbed for, like, they're actually, like industry-defining thing, and then later they give this really great performance, and then the Oscars, like, for that and all the other stuff. That's kind of what I'm doing here with ribbons.
That's actually, that I feel like that's an insult, because that's how you get, like, Scent of a Woman and things like that for Al Pacino, and that's dumb. But yes, no, I totally understand what you mean. It's amazing, and I feel like that is how Toru Furuya finally got one over on Shuichi Ikeda for being the more popular Gundam character. Is Ikeda did this, what they probably thought was going to be a fun thing coming back for Seed Destiny, and it utterly bombed and didn't work at all.
Yeah.
And then Toru Furuya's like, well, hey, you got anything for me? And he got ribbons, and he won that round. He won that round hard.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'll say my number one maybe is Ikeda Shuichi, but it's not for fucking Durandal from Seed Destiny.
Our number one, should we just say it together?
Yeah, our number one,
Ikeda?
Shuichi Ikeda as Char. I specifically said Gundam the Origin because it is my favorite stuff he does. Obviously, it's just Char in general. But there is something particularly about late period Shuichi Ikeda and what he does with his, like, much, like, more gravelly voice he has, that just, he leans into it so hard. And some of those line reads in Gundam the Origin, like, will literally make your fucking blood freeze. It's so chilling and so good. But obviously, the whole performance across the whole scope of Gundam is amazing and one of the best performances in any anime. It's got to be number one.
It's got to be number one. It is, if you are listing the best anime performances ever, it's on that Mount Rushmore at the very least, right? Like, it is top 5. It is near the top of that list. It's one of the most incredible things that's ever been done in anime. And there's only a couple other analogs of someone who's played a character for this amount of time, like, Son Goku or Nozawa Masako, something like that, right? Yeah. There's very few analogs, and Ikeda is near the top of that pile.
100%.
Yeah. All right, next one is top 5 Gundam character deaths. And there are a couple of ways you could have gone around thinking about this, so I'm curious to hear your thoughts, Sean. I went with a pretty straight, like, what were the deaths that moved me and touched me the most? But then I also have a couple of what are just entertainingly gory deaths.
Yeah. I decided not to do the depressing ones, and so I did not do the emotional. So I'm glad that we'll have two different kinds of lists then, generally speaking, because I interpreted this as, like, top deaths in the way you would do that list for, like, horror or action movies. I wanted, like, the most just sort of, like, gruesome and satisfying deaths. So I didn't include stuff like, say, Orga's death in Iron Blood Orphans, which is, like, one of the best death scenes in Gundam, but it's too sad, and I didn't want to be sad, so I wanted to have fun when I made my list.
Here's how we do this. I'll do mine first and make us sad, and then you'll do yours and make us laugh. How about that?
I think that's a good way to do it.
My number 5 saddest death is Lock-On Stratos.
Oh.
The end of his life with Haro going lock on, lock on, lock on is one of the most memorable and heartbreaking things in all of Gundam. It's incredible.
Yeah, now I'm already sad.
I know.
Sad.
My number 4, I think this is the most masterful piece of death-related showmanship in all of Gundam, and that is Master Asia's death, and him and Domon, doing the creed about the East is burning red, and the text coming up on the screen as they look out at the sunset. That's a top 5 Gundam death right there.
Yeah. Still depressed.
My number 3, probably the most depressing, is Orga Itsuka, because I think for pure, unadulterated gut punch, I don't think it gets more powerful than this. or more surprising, like in terms of actual unexpected Gundam deaths. I think we talked about this on Iron-Blooded Orphans. I always expected Mikazuki to die. I didn't expect Orga to die, and he goes first. And then Frisia comes on as his blood points towards the future. Holy shit, that is a moment.
Yeah.
My number 2 is the original, the classic, the iconic Gundam death, Lala Soon, in Gundam 79, and everything that comes after it. The song Beginning plays in my mind, but it could also be the song Now is Goodnight, depending on which version you're thinking of. You know, Amuro did something that he can never take back, and the glow of hatred burns in space. Now, my number 1, this is just very personal to me. This is my list, but this is the one that has always hit me hardest, and this is Emma Sheen in Zeta Gundam. I rewatched the scene again last night. This is just one of the most frank death as deaths in the franchise. Not an explosion or a sudden end, but she has been injured, and at the start of the final episode, it's this frank conversation between 2 adults, 2 friends, 2 compatriots on the battlefield together, as Emma passes off this baton to Camille, who also knows he's probably going to die, and gives him this insight about the Zeta Gundam absorbing people's wills to move on. And then it produces one of my most single favorite images in the Gundam world, which is Camille activating the airlock and Emma's hair suddenly standing up on end, and then her body beginning to float as he says, Emma Chui, Camille Bidan, ikimasu. That is a perfect Gundam moment.
Yeah, it's a great scene. I think if I were doing my sad death list, I think mine would be very similar. I probably wouldn't put the Emma Sheen one on there because I respect, like, I know it hits you very personally. But yeah, I maybe would replace that with like Mika's death in Iron Blood Orphans or something like that.
Also great. Yeah.
And I would probably have Orga for me personally on the sad ones. That would be my number 1. But yes. Yeah. But I'm depressed as fuck. So let's talk about some really fun deaths. Number 5 for my deaths that I did this like reacting on like the desired reaction for a death in my ranking is a like, oh shit. That's kind of the reaction I want to have, right? So my number 5 is Tol Koenig, or Kira's buddy, who gets decapitated by Othran's shield at the midpoint of Gundam Seed. This is the big fight where Nicol, who's Othran's buddy, is killed, and Othran throws a shield, and Tol is into his like fighter jet or whatever, and his head gets cut off. This particularly makes the list over other stuff because they show it to you like a dozen times because they keep on giving you flashbacks, and it's so gruesome watching this like 15-year-old boy get his fucking head cut off by this giant plate of metal. And because Seed loves its goddamn flashbacks, they show it to you over and over and over again. And Tol is one of those characters who he's likable enough, but he's so minor a character that you're not particularly, you sympathize with Kira's reaction and everyone else on the ship, but you personally don't have enough attachment to him to feel that bad about it. So it gets that real like slasher movie death thing of like, oh fuck. And it's a good time.
It is so weird to me to remember that Seed is one of the grisliest Gundam shows.
Yes.
But it is. Like, that's not its reputation, I feel, but it absolutely is one of the most graphic Gundam shows.
Yeah, I mean, if you were doing this just purely on the most gruesome deaths, it's all the people who get fucking exploded when the big super weapon goes off in the second third of Gundam Seed, and there's like all these people it's like very Akira-esque, and they just explode and it's bloody and it's horrible, but they're like kind of not named characters, so it doesn't quite make how I did my list. So that was my number 5. My number 4 is Iuk Kujan. You might remember him as the shithead in Iron-Blooded Orphans, who in the finale gets crushed to death in his own cockpit by Akihiko. And it's just that you give that great death scene where he's screaming, going like, no, 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 and the whole frame of blackness just closes in on him until it squeezes him out. And it's just so brutal. But it is so deserved for just like the most annoying fucking cocksucker in that entire show. And just seeing him just squeezed into nothingness is hugely satisfying.
Also, Akihiko's line there is just such a stand-up and cheer moment of him saying, at least, in the afterlife, I'll get to tell you all about this. Yes. And then he squeezes him to death.
Yeah, because it's with the big fucking scissors, too. The big Gundam scissors, which are just like one of the best weapons. That one's fantastic. Number 3, this is a great one, is Reno Fernandez getting tricked by Char into getting killed by his own squad in Gundam The Origin. This is one of the most brutal, cold-hearted fucking deaths in the whole franchise. There were a bunch from Gundam the Origin. I considered doing, like, actual Char Noble's death, which is also pretty amazing. But there's something about this being an anime original and how well staged it is and just how fucking cold it is when Char gets this fucker killed on, like, the night that he becomes, like, truly the Red Comet and he sort of inherits his name as Char.
Getting killed by his friends.
Yes.
Who also, like, unwittingly kill their friend. It's so evil.
Yeah, because they think he's already been killed, and so they're incensed at Reno Fernandez's death, but in doing so, they actually kill him. It's just the most fucked up shit you've ever seen. It's amazing. All right, so then my top two. Number two is, this is a classic, Cecilia Zabi getting decapitated by an RPG at the end of the original Mobile Suit Gundam. This is one of the most, like, shockingly brutal deaths that, like, famously was, like, kind of had to be censored because the original version of it was too gory, and it's still gory. But just the concept of she gets this rocket shot at her, and it's not that she blows up, it's her head gets fucking cut off by the rocket-propelled grenade that goes through her head, and then it hits behind her and explodes and blows up the whole ship is just, like, so brutal and so excessive in that very, like, action movie kind of way that it just goes that extra step. And every time you watch it, you're just, like, shocked because you don't expect it to quite go that way. I also have to say that this in some ways stands in for all of the Zabi deaths, because it would have been easy to fill this whole list with just the way that all of the Zabi family dies in original Gundam, because they all get amazing death scenes. But Cecilia is my favorite of the Zabi family deaths.
Yeah. All right. I'm curious what your number. Oh no, I know what your number one is. Never mind. Tell us.
My number one, just incredible. It's Patmos Shiroko getting impaled on the end of the Wave Rider at the end of Zeta Gundam. This is the most action movie, like, fuck yes. You almost want Arnold Schwarzenegger to say a fucking one-liner afterwards. No, it's so good. Patmos Shiroko is one of the most despicable fucking characters in all of Gundam, and seeing him get murdered in the most, like, creative way of that, he doesn't get shot down, doesn't get stabbed with a fucking beam saber. No, the Zeta Gundam transforms into its plain Wave Rider form, and just rams straight into the cockpit, and it's the tip of the nose of the Wave Rider impales Patmos Shiroko. And the way it's animated and how weird and deformed it gets, and, like, intentionally bringing everything kind of off model to exaggerate the impact of all of this, and then Patmos Shiroko, like, cursing Camille and, like, all that shit that happens afterwards. Just amazing death. It was one of those that when we watched the Zeta movies that obviously redoes all this stuff, like, seeing that shit happen again and being like, oh my god, this is so good. It's easily my favorite, like, big, cool villain death in any Gundam thing.
It's fantastic. I had a couple of honorable mentions for my version of this. One is, I forget her name, but it's the woman in Victory who dies defending the bridge, and you have the space ramp, and you have the image of the Gundam holding up the hole in the wall. One of the best images in Gundam.
I mean, you could fill the whole list with just Victory Gundam deaths. Like, that's almost like its own list of death scenes, really.
Yes, it is. And that's probably my favorite in Victory. You have the mother who gets the shell dropped on her head in F91. As enduring Gundam images go, that one's pretty up there. And then I also just want to give a shout out to Amuro Ray in the novels. That is a fucking gut punch at the end of the Gundam novelization where Amuro dies and his consciousness, radiates through the battlefield. It's a phenomenal piece of writing.
Yeah. Turns out there are a lot of death scenes in Gundam. Like, when I was trying to come... I mean, that's one of the reasons why I was like, I need to just narrow this down to, like, what are, like, the fun deaths? Because it's too hard to try to... Because I was ranking, like, which is better? Orga's death scene or Cecilia Zabi's death scene? I'm like, how the fuck do I rank those two next to each other?
No, you don't, yeah. One of those makes you cry, one of those makes you cheer.
Yes.
So, different. Here is one... Sean, here's a fun list for us. This is top 5 Gundam crushes.
Yes.
So which Gundam characters do we have crushes on? Let's learn, Sean. Who is your number 5 Gundam crush?
My number 5, voiced by Tanaka Rie, it is Maribit Stapleton from Iron-Blooded Orphans. She's like the older, like the adult woman that kind of is in charge of the kids. and is kind of like taking care of them and all that stuff. I've always had kind of a crush on that character. I think because she's got real hardcore like teacher energy to me, and so it's like I feel like a synergy or simpatico with that character in that sense of like, yeah, no, I get it, like being in charge of all these crazy teenagers, like yeah, great character, big crush.
My number 5, all the girls and men on my list are adults. There's one of the teenage characters on this list, and I am very much, this is someone I would have been attracted to in high school.
Sure.
Because of her personality, but also because of what she's into, and what she's into is the Gyan, and that is Gyanko Karuoko Sasaki from Gundam Build Fighters Try. Not any attraction now, but that is the kind of girl I was attracted to in high school, and she's super into the Gyan. I felt like that, that merited a call out on this list.
I'll say I considered Gyanko, and it was like, I can't put because I just thought about like, what does it sound like when I'm like, look, I swear it's like, this is just when I'm saying from the perspective of if I was a teenager, that's why it's like, I just don't want to go through that rigmarole, so I'm just not going to count that. But if I had to, yeah, like Gyanko, from that perspective, I would agree with Gyanko.
Because also, like, that's not the kind of, like, personality type I'm into now, which is, like, the very kind of, like, bossy mean girl.
Yes.
But that was my thing in high school, and it never ended well. But I wish those, girls I was into had been into the Gyan. That would have been cool.
Yes. I have a fondness for the Ojo-sama anime archetype as well, and that's very much, Gyanko is a very fun one of those.
Yes.
All right, so then my number 4 from Gundam Seed, it's Mare Ramius, the captain. Mitsubishi Kotono, we've talked about her before. I just find her very charming and attractive, and I like her.
My number 4 is Hamon Crowley, and I'm specifically going to go with Miyuki Sawashiro's version from Gundam The Origin. I don't think she'd ever have me, but I love Miss Hamon. She's wonderful.
She might be on my list also. My number 3, and this is another one that after like doing Origin and reading the manga and stuff has like moved up, is Sayla Mass from Gundam. Like, I've always really liked Sayla. And like that character and everything, but it is particularly like after getting that like expanded version of the character, and particularly like the way that Yasuhiko draws her is just like so fucking cool. That yeah, she is my number 3 crush.
I think that's a good pick. My number 3, I'm gonna have to go with her brother. I'm going with Char. Char as a Gundam crush. Let's be honest, he has ambiguous sexuality, and if he'll have me, I think Char's pretty fucking cool. He'd probably kill me, but...
I thought about Char, but then every time I thought about putting Char on the list, like, I just, like, Quest Pariah just flashed through my head in Char's counterattack. I'm like, I just can't do it. Like, I just can't do it. Like, he's a fucking monster. Like, he's hot as shit. But my god, he's an awful monster. So I just couldn't put him on the list because it's like, it's too much.
I can be into it. It's fine. Yeah. All right, what's your number 2?
My number 2, you said her earlier, it's Hamon Crowley, the Origin version specifically, voiced by Sawashiro Miyuki. This is like very much that like the crush thing of like, I would never in any universe with that kind of person like presume anything of like to try to have a relationship, but would just admire from a distance because of how cool she is.
My number 2 is Sei's mom, Rinko Yori, because Sei's mom has got it going on.
My number 1 is Yori. Sei's mom, Yori Rinko. She is everything. She's
she's all I want, and I've waited for so long. I know it might be wrong, but I'm in love with Sei's mom.
Look, Sei's, dad is not around that much. He's got this whole world Gunpla job thing that he's just traveling all the time. Sometimes maybe she gets lonely. I don't know. It's like, it's a human reaction. She's a very attractive woman. She's got a nice, stable job running this hobby shop. She's got a beautiful family that she cares a lot about. I mean, what's not to like?
If Sei's dad died, I would totally be there for that. I would adopt Sei. He's a cool kid. We'd get along. We both like Gundam. I'd be a cool stepdad. It'd be great. Yeah.
It's just I can just imagine a whole life with Yori Rinko, voiced also again by Kotono Mitsubishi. Just great character. Yeah.
My number 1 is Haman Karn. Step on me, Space Queen.
For me, Haman Karn like ascends this list. For me, Haman Karn was like, it's too presumptuous. I can't. Haman-sama, no, she can't be on the like. It's not my place. It is not my place to put her on a list. It's inappropriate.
In this world, I would be Masha Cello. I would be doing war crimes just for 5 minutes in her presence. Let's do it.
Yeah, like Haman Karn is like my secret zero pick, but it's just like couldn't. Okay. It's like Haman Sama. No, it's just I can't. No, I just can't. It's just not. I'm not at that station in life, and I never will be.
All right, almost done with the lists. Top 5 Earth re-entry episodes of Gundam. I thought this was a fun suggestion. A lot of options here because they re-enter to Earth a lot. Sean, what is your 5th favorite Earth re-entry episode?
Before you get into it, I'm just curious to know, Jonathan, did you, because when I found this so hard to do, that I ended up just going through and making a list of every single Earth re-entry episode I could find, because it's like, how do I even, and I was shocked to find, like, it is legitimately almost every major Gundam show has at least one Earth re-entry episode. Like, it's not just like a meme we say of like, oh yeah, the Earth re-entry one is always the best episode. It's like, no, legitimately almost every single Gundam show does. There was like more than I think I would have realized. And I had a very hard time making this list.
I made a list of all of them, and then I got my Gundam hard drive out, and I was just like spot checking all of these episodes to refresh my memory. And I think I like my top 5, but
I like my top 5 a lot. But there are a lot of these. So my number 5 is Mobile Suit Gundam Age episode 27. I saw a red sunset. So that is
also my number 5.
Oh, interesting. Yeah. So this is obviously where Asuma and Zehart. It's at the end of the Asuma arc. Effectively, there's that one like episode that kind of is a bridge episode. But it's at the end of that arc. And it's the thing is like falling or whatever, and they have to blow it up from the inside. And it's the first time you get on Earth in Gundam Age, and that like the ending of the episode that the title refers to, I saw Red Sunset, is such a striking shot in such a big moment. It's like one of those things that like has stood in my memory with Gundam Age forever, is that you're thinking about, and they're talking about Earth for so long. And this is just like, it's such a huge stretch for a Gundam show before you actually get there. And this being that moment where you finally land on Earth, you see the sunset, you see what these people have been fighting over the entire time. And then that leads into the Kyo arc for the end of the show. It's just an amazing episode.
It is, and the final image that you're talking about, I have a wallpaper on my desktop. I have a revolving door of wallpapers on my desktop, and that is one of them, and it is one of the best single Gundam images. Also one of the most different Earth re-entry episodes, because most Earth re-entry episodes borrow a lot from the original re-entry to Earth. This one does something pretty different with it, and it's very powerful.
Absolutely. So then my number 4 is Mobile Suit Gundam Episode 5, Re-entry to Earth.
How is that not number 1? I don't get it.
There are better Earth re-entry episodes than that one.
It's
a great episode. This is a list of like 25 episodes. But you will see. I'm surprised that my number 1 apparently maybe isn't your number 1. If Re-entry to Earth is your number 1, we'll see. I had a hard time with this one. The Zeta one and the Double Zeta one are all pretty similar in structure and style. And they're all really great. The Zeta one, episode 11, Entering the Atmosphere, is where Patmos Shiroko comes in. Double Zeta has episode 23, Earth Ablaze, that's where kind of you get a lot of the LP Puto stuff gets brought up in like that character transitions to be on the protagonist side. But there's the classic re-entry to Earth. I mean, it's mostly an action-focused episode, but it's incredible. Char's plan to get people to that even if he loses this fight, which he does, he still pushes the white base off trajectory to land in Zeon territory is an amazing ending to the episode. And of course, it ends with the great, iconic, and canon-breaking moment of the Gundam taking out the heat film, a thing that it definitely never has again, because it is such a like world-breaking item that it's like, here's this little film blanket that we could just use to have these mobile suits re-enter the Earth and just protect us from all that shit. And it's like, weirdly, nothing ever uses that technology ever again in the Universal Century, huh? But yes, I think I would have thought initially that this episode would be higher, but when I actually looked at what some of the other Re-entry to Earth episodes were, I was like, no, like it legitimately is not as high, mostly because it's a very standard action-focused episode, which the standard action-focused episode of Mobile Suit Gundam is still better than most episodes of other shows, but other shows use their Re-entry to Earth episode for bigger, more dramatic purposes.
Fair enough. I guess for me, I'll just say it's my number 1. And it's my number 1 because it is the high that all of these other ones are chasing to a certain degree. It is the most copied episode of original Gundam. Like, it is just, yeah. My number 4 is Gundam Seed number 13, Stars Falling in Space. I think this is probably the first great episode of Gundam Seed, with the setup and payoff of the family in the shuttle that Kira has rescued and the flower the little girl has. And then it culminates. I mean, it's a really good action sequence that culminates in Izak destroying the shuttle, mistakenly thinking it's a platoon, killing all of these civilians aboard, and kicking us into the really good stretch of Seed where we start to critically analyze the violence that is going on. This is a pivotal episode.
Yeah, that did not quite make my list, but I agree with you. This is like one of the great early episodes of Seed, and it does a lot of great stuff with that show. All right, then my number 3 is Mobile Suit Gundam Iron-Blooded Orphans episode 19, The Gravity of Wishes. This is kind of like with the Gundam Age 1. This is a really monumental episode in that show because, you know, the entire first season or whatever, that show is about them getting to Earth. And so they spend 18 of the 25 episodes of the first season on their way to Earth, or like trying to plan to get to Earth. And so the 19 is this hugely impactful moment of, we are actually here now, we're trying to get in, seeing the Iron-Blooded Orphans style in the very like grounded sort of like gritty version of the sci-fi stuff that IBO goes for, and seeing that and like Mika having to tackle the challenges of Earth reentry is really fascinating. But it's also there's a lot of great stuff with McGill's Farid in that episode. When I had some thumb through it the other night looking at all these, and I think what puts it higher up than something like Reentry to Earth is that like the weight and the like thematic potency of, oh, we're getting into Earth, and like as the title says, the gravity of wishes, this like these orphans having finally like actually made it this far, these people from Mars getting to Earth for the first time and actually seeing it and doing this. It's a really great episode.
It is. It was kind of like my number 6. It didn't quite make it for me, but it's a great one. My number 3 is, you mentioned it earlier, it's Zeta Gundam number 11, Entering the Atmosphere. Just a classic virtuoso piece of Zeta Gundam action. This is the one, you mentioned this is where we meet Paptimus. This is also where Bright officially takes over the Argama. Mm-hmm. And so this is the first one where Bright is like basically on point for everything. And I have always vividly remembered the imagery of, in this one, like very clearly Tomino was like, we're not doing the fucking heat film again. And so he's got everyone in the like big balloons that they wind up being on, the ballasts that they're like falling on through the atmosphere, and just some really amazing striking imagery.
Very nice. So my number 2 is kind of 2 episodes, or it's like an episode and a half because it's sort of split up across 2 parts. Is Mobile Suit Victory Gundam episodes 50, The Battle Called Upon by Hate, and episode 51, The Ascension of the Angels, because effectively the finale of Victory Gundam is basically a big Earth re-entry arc. So it is the Halo in space crashing. Yeah. So this is some of the stuff I was thinking about of like, I don't think that Re-entry to Earth is number 1. So the Halo is crashing into Earth. This is, you know, basically all of the final battle of Victory Gundam happens while they're coming in through the Earth atmosphere. And Katesh and Hassan going crazy. Uso and Chronicle Asher fighting each other, like fucking like a dozen people get killed. It is just an incredible action sequence. You have that amazing image of Kateshina finally being like fully unleashed, and like her like as a puppet master pulling the strings of Chronicle and Asher, which is the last shot of episode 50, The Battle Called Upon by Hate. It is a thing where it takes the dynamics, and it is the first time that the show does this, where it takes the dynamics of Re-entry to Earth, the Mobile Suit Gundam episode that introduces this concept, and uses it not purely for action purposes, but the rush and haste and like intensity of this notion of falling to Earth and gravity, and using that and combining it with a finale. It's the first time that Gundam does that. They do it a couple of other times. Another time they do it is my number 1. But Victory Gundam's finales, fantastic.
It is fantastic, and I'm just going to admit, I forgot about this, because I was looking at other places in Victory Gundam, and I just somehow forgot there's so much that happens in the last 2 of Victory Gundam. It is so big and so virtuoso that I think I didn't consider it. So, I am renaming my list. My list is now the Gundam Episode 5 Memorial Top 5 Earth Re-entry episodes, and Gundam Episode 5 has been disqualified because the list is in its honor, and I will talk more about where those Victory Gundam episodes wind up in a second. My number 2 is Reconquista in G number 25, Crossing the Line of Death, which is the G-Reco version of Earth Re-entry, which means it's one of the most virtuosic Earth reentries ever. So much amazing character material, such great use of the G-Self and its different powers. It's a fucking tour de force, and it's great.
I'll say that's my number one. My number one is Gundam Rekkon Senji episode 25, Crossing the Line of Death, which is kind of similar to Victory Gundam. It's not the finale, but it is still that thing of like, we are coming into the home stretch and we are using the Earth reentry dynamics to sort of like deliver the momentum of our kind of final thrust for the story. And it's got all the action chops of G-Recko that are the same kinds of action chops that a show like Mobile Suit Gundam episode 5 has. But it is also delivering on this like much more heightened narrative moment in the show, which is what pushes it to the top for me.
And I'm going to put Victory 50 and 51 as my number one, because I want Victory to be number one at something. And I think those two just, it's so funny. The moment you mentioned their names, I just, all these images start cascading over me, because that is, you know, something Tomino is so uniquely good at in his shows, is those Earth reentry, or we could have also done getting off Earth episodes, because there's a bunch of great ones of that, which Victory Gundam is also maybe the king of, I think. And, you know, I think turning that into the grand finale of Victory, which is behind G-Recko as the best action in Gundam, I think pretty easily. You know, doing that as the big grand finale. I think it's the whole idea of the size of the halo of the thing they're trying to stop coming down with them that pushes this over the top for me and makes it number one. And I think that's why I overlooked it, is it's just so big.
Yes.
And it kind of breaks out of the archetype in a lot of ways, you know?
Yeah, 100%. Again, like, because most of the episodes are more of that kind of like happens sometime around episode 12, 13-ish for most of these shows, and they're like, this is like a fun action beat. But a couple of shows, G-Recko, Victory, Wing, use their Earth reentry episodes as like their big kind of finale pieces. I want to shout out very quickly, because it's not, the reentry stuff is a very small part of this episode, but if we had to pick the best Earth reentry moment, it would go to Mobile Suit Gundam episode 28, Alleluia Rescue Operation, which is where Sumeragi Lee Noriega and everyone on the ship, they go from space and just dive bomb straight into the ocean, causing a massive tidal wave that hits the prison complex that they're trying to invade to get Alleluia. Again, it's like, it's not really much of an Earth reentry episode, because most of it isn't about that, but if you pick just like, here's 5 minutes, this is like the best 5 minutes involving Earth reentry, because it is so fucking cool. So I wanted to give that a quick shout out.
In that vein, the end of Unicorn Gundam episode 3 is the same way, where you have Banaji get like knocked out and he's falling, and then the end credits play out over that with the song in a montage, and that is one of the like really incredible moments in Unicorn. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'll say, like, all said and done, if you're combining some, like, 2 parts and stuff, I counted on my list, I had 15 total Earth reentry sort of stories.
That's crazy.
You can break it into 16 if you want to break one of the... Because I actually had Gundam Wing listed twice. Technically, episode 1 of Gundam Wing is an Earth reentry episode, just it's only at the very beginning. But, it's like 15, 16-ish. And I'm probably missing 1 or 2. It's like, it's nuts how many Earth reentry episodes there actually are.
All right. Let's do some quick hits, and we're going to end with character names, because I want to end with some laughs.
Yeah.
But Sean, here are, from different listeners, here are just some quick hits. And we're going to do this rapid fire. Best Gundam scene.
The end of Diana's war, where they're doing the laundry and the bubbles come up, and Lauren and Diana's faces are reflected in the bubbles. And they're like smiling and happy because they found a way to use the Gundam for something other than murdering people for once.
That is a phenomenal scene. My mind also goes to Turn A Gundam and just the closing montage of the series, I think is in there.
Yes. Well, that's going to be my answer to the next question. It's going to be the closing finale of the montage of Turn A Gundam.
So the next question is, what's the best Gundam finale?
And for me, it's Turn A Gundam.
Yeah, I think as an overall episode, I probably lean towards the final episode of the original Gundam. But I think in terms of the actual like closing moments and scenes, it is Turn A Gundam. And so it's kind of a tie for me between those two. But Turn A has the most virtuosic sequence to end a Gundam series, no doubt.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and for me, it's also between those two. And I kind of agree with that breakdown. I think the overall episode is probably better for Mobile Suit Gundam. But like that ending montage and that like everything about that at the very end of Turn A is incredible.
Yeah. What's the best Gundam premiere?
The Gundam Daiichi Nitats, the first episode of Mobile Suit Gundam, it is like maybe the best first episode of any TV show ever made.
I think that's true. I think certainly for anime, it's harder when you get into like 2-hour pilots, but in 20 minutes, it does what a lot of series would take seasons to do. I mean, Jesus Christ, it's amazing. What's the best slap and or punch?
It's the iconic one where, it's the one where I can quote the scene in Japanese of where, Amuro gets slapped. He gets slapped twice, and he does the "Niroto butta oyaji ni butata koto nai no ni." It's like, you hit me twice? Like, I've never even been hit by my father. It's like, that's why you're spoiled. Like, who's ever become a proper man without being hit? It's particularly the moment where Amuro turns to like an not Amuro, Bright slaps him and then turns to an invisible crowd and like puts his arms out like, what? Look at the shit I have to deal with. It's like, swear to God, I'm Tariranda. It's amazing. That scene is just one of the great iconic Gundam scenes. It is the best slap.
It's the best slap. It also leads to one of the best laughs ever in Gundam Build Fighters when Sei is hypnotized and is quoting it. And I will also just give a shout out to a slap we don't see, but in Zeta there is that scene where Bright gets on the comms and says, "Tell him to get up here for a correction," and then slaps his hand.
Yeah.
That's my other favorite one, because it's him slapping his hand, promising to slap the kid.
That's very
fucking great.
Yeah.
Best remote weapons, bits, funnels, even the wire-guided guns of the Brawl Bro.
Brow Bro. They spelled it wrong. It's the wire-guided guns of the Brow Bro. Like, it's because for people who don't remember, that's the like prototype to the Elmeth, the like Psycommu like new type stuff. So it's the prototype to the bits and funnels and everything, and they're connected by actual wires to the Brow Bro, and it's so cool. It's such a good. I love that idea that they haven't figured out how to make them self-propelled yet, so that they're attached by these thin metal wires to the actual device, but are still like maneuverable in 3D space. Awesome. It's just, they're so cool. It's either that, the other one would be the fin funnels on the new Gundam, or the other best remote weapons.
I go with the fin funnels on the new Gundam, but I think I would just swap your number 1 and 2, but those are the two best ones. I agree. What's the best shield?
For me, it's the Gundam Mark II shield is my favorite. There's something about the Gundam Mark II shield that I love. It's got a little, like, it's something where, like, the new Gundam shield takes a bunch from it, but it's got, like, this, like, nice notch and edge, like, kind of two-pronged edge at the front of it that they kind of rest their gun in and stuff. It's just a very cool, very nice shield design. That is, like, the prototype of most Gundams have a shield that's broadly based on the Mark II shield more than the actual original one.
I love the original one, I will say. I think the original one, I love the red and the big yellow part on it. I love building that shield in the Gunpla. But my favorite shield ever is the Sazabi, I think, has. That black with the big red trim. Fuck yeah. It's huge.
I'll also give a shout out to, because this is like, partially this like isn't really a shield almost at that point, but but the Goof custom with the Gatling gun on the shield, like, I don't know if that even counts, because it's more of just a gun at that point, but when he puts the Gatling gun on the shield, it's pretty fucking cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Who is the most fucked up cyber new type?
It's Kateshi Nasan. That's the easy answer for me. For all the reasons I said earlier, like, it's that her becoming a cyber new type unleashes a thing that's already there, rather than twisting her into a different person, which is what it feels like with people like 4 and most of the cyber new types feel like they have been turned into a monster, whereas like Kateshi feels like the monster has been unleashed.
She's the Walter White of this series.
Exactly, yeah. It's that kind of thing.
If they ever do it in live action, they gotta cast Bryan Cranston as Katagina Luz.
Yes.
I'm kidding. If I slightly twist this question to be the most tragic, I would say it is Puru. Poor Puru. She just needs to be a little girl and be Judo's adoptive little sister, and the cyber new type stuff fucks it up, not once but twice.
Yeah, especially
12 times if you go to Unicorn.
Yeah, if you count all the Purus together, like, yes, that is the saddest cyber new type scenario for sure.
Off the cuff, what Gundam show are you most eager to rewatch?
I have already rewatched every Gundam show. I guess in some ways, maybe my answer can only be Re-Rise as the only thing I haven't already rewatched at least once. I would say for me,
the other one is Build Divers 1, but you don't want to rewatch
I don't want to rewatch that. I would say, like, for me, like, in terms of the shows I most enjoyed rewatching would probably be like Seed and G-Reco. And maybe Victory were probably the ones I like got the most from watching those shows again. Because they're like, there's lots of stuff about those shows that I enjoyed, but I think I appreciated more when I could see them with that bigger picture.
I am excited to at some point rewatch everything. Top of my head, it's Victory and it's the original Seed, because those are the two that I think my opinion has evolved on the most while watching and post watching. and I want to go back to for that reason. I'm very excited to watch Zeta again and Double Zeta, but I know I love that. Like, my opinion on those is fairly settled, so I would love to... Turn A is the same way. I would love to watch Turn A again, but I don't have this kind of itch about wanting to re-see it knowing what I know now in the way I do with Seed and with Victory.
Yeah. I will say that I think, like, the most eminently rewatchable ones are all the Tomino shows. I think Tomino's stuff is so rich to rewatch.
It's so dense.
Yeah. You just, like, every time we've watched stuff like Char's Counterattack multiple times, like, you always find more. And so it's like, Tomino's stuff in particular just is very rewarding to watch again.
Yeah. Which 1-to-1 scale, so full-size Gundam, should they erect a big statue of in the USA?
It's the Gundam Maxter, which is Chibity Crockett's Gundam from Mobile Fighter G Gundam, which is the US Gundam, the weird, like, boxing football one. And
down towards the border, you put up the Tequila Gundam.
Oh, God.
I'm kidding.
That's something that America absolutely would do.
That is something that America would do. No, I agree. I think we should tear down the Statue of Liberty and put up the Gundam Maxter. I think that is the right thing to do.
Absolutely.
Maybe we can get France to pay for it. They built the Statue of Liberty, but what have they done for us in the last 300 years? Come on.
Exactly. Fuck off, France. Give us a Gundam. Give us your cool Gundam. Why are you giving us, like, big green ladies? We didn't ask for that.
All right. What's something you want to see in Witch from Mercury? And I have to say, they've already given it to us, which is a female Gundam protagonist. Is like the number one thing I would have wanted because it's the newest thing they could do. And they're doing that. But they're also doing Gundam designs that look like G-Reco. So that's... I mean, it feels like it's doing all the things I want it to do. So, yeah.
Like, if this question had been asked before, which I think it maybe actually was, before they did the big news dump that gave us, like, the basic premise and stuff, my answer would have been, like, I want something new. I want them to do, like, a different take and do new territory for the Gundam franchise, and that is exactly what they're doing. Female protagonist is awesome. Having a Gundam girl is something that the franchise has needed to do for a very long time. And then I'm very excited by the school direction that, like, the like Gundam Academy kind of thing they're going in, with these different houses from these different, like, families within this huge multi-conglomerate company thing that is kind of the setup that they've announced so far. And having that be different houses in almost Harry Potter-esque sense is, like, a really cool, crazy idea. It's written by the guy who did Code Geass, which I haven't watched yet, but I know deals with, like, it's like a mecha show that is set in, like, with, like, high school characters and stuff.
We're going to have to do a Code Geass episode before Witch from Mercury.
Yeah, we'll have to find time to do that and look at that show. But yeah, so far, like, my answer would be kind of like what they're doing, which is breaking new ground for Gundam and going in different directions. And so I'm very excited.
Given the school setting, I cannot wait to get the theme song for this and strip out the music and put on the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX theme song.
Yes.
And have it just going, come on and get your game on.
They
the
should
English one. The Japanese one is good too, but...
They should just, like, license the Yu-Gi-Oh! GX song. Like, just cut out the middleman on that and just use it again.
There we go. Sean, what is the Gundam world you most want to live in? And what's the Gundam world you least want to live in?
I think, like, if you want to be cheap for the most want to live in, you can just say Gundam Build Fighters, which feels very cheap to say.
I know. Yeah, that's a little cheap.
It's just living in Gundam heaven. It's just living in, like, an idealized version of our reality. If you say that you can't pick one of the ones that's just set basically in our world, like, I would probably say something like Turn A or G-Reco, or even, like, as fucked up as it is, because I was thinking about this last night when I was thinking about, like, answering this question. Iron-Blooded Orphans kind of would be, like, fine as long as you're not one of the orphans, right? For people like us, who are just kind of like middle-class people living in that world, your life's probably totally fine. Like, you know, it'll be fucked up in ways similar to the ways our actual real-world lives are fucked up, but we wouldn't be living in a world where someone's trying to nuke the entire planet and exterminate all life on Earth. And so compared to Victory Gundam, which would be my least want to live in world,
yes,
Iron-Blooded Orphans for us would be fine. It's just would be fucked up as our life in real world is fucked up, because there are child soldiers and there are slaves and there is human trafficking and all kinds of awful shit that just doesn't affect us. But we would be alive and not be incinerated by, like, a space laser or something in that world.
Well, you heard it here first, folks. Sean wants to live in the child soldier world. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, I think G-Reco would be my honest answer here. There's something about the agrarian society of Turn A that I would love to live in, but I think life expectancy is probably longer in the G-Reco world.
Yeah,
so...
and the moon people would freak me out,
Yes.
The moon people coming down in Turn A Gundam. I mean, it's a similar thing in G-Reco, but I feel like most of the world in G-Reco is actually a little bit isolated from some of that shit that's going on. It's kind of what it feels like.
And, if I wanted to... This is assuming be a civilian. If I wanted to get in on the Gundam action, I'm going G-Fighter. Like, yeah, let me do that. That'd be fun.
Man, the G-Fighter world is actually so fucking bleak, though. It's like all the countries have, like, Neo versions that are floating in space, and, like, the actual world has been turned into a giant fucking sports arena. And yes. Like, all of Earth history is just, like, trampled on, and the planet is dying. Like, it's secretly Mobile Fighter G Gundam is, like, one of the darkest Gundams, weirdly enough.
I don't see what's wrong with it. I think the UN, we should just start the Hunger Games, and whoever country's champion wins the Hunger Games, that's who rules the world.
Yeah. But I do think, for least favorite, I think Victory Gundam is such an easy, or, like, least one to live in.
Yes, it's Victory Gundam.
Because, like, the idea of, like, looking out your window and seeing this, like, skyscraper-tall, massive fortress that's basically just a giant wheel demolishing your city as it's on the way to your house is, like, such a nightmarish fucking concept. Where that show goes in the home stretch with what, like, the Zanskar Empire is doing to Earth is so fucked up. It's the most, like, specific, attentive, industrial, like, fucking genocide that we've seen in any of the Gundam shows, and it's utterly horrifying. And so that is the one I'd like to stay the fuck away from, please.
I completely agree. I mean, the thing about Victory is that before you get into any of the war crimes you just described, this world has lived through all of the Universal Century shit. So it's all the bad stuff has happened, including 2 colony drops and all the other crazy shit, and then it gets worse. Oh my god, get me out of there, please, right?
Yeah. Just the real answer is just, like, in general, it's the Universal Century. For the love of God, keep me away from... I do not want to live in the Universal Century. There's, like, maybe one tiny little gap where you could have, like, one generation of people that are fine around Unicorn Gundam, and that's it. Like, if you could just get that, there's, like, a sweet spot right about there, before, like, people are unleashing bugs, or, like, anyone's, like, running over entire cities with giant wheeling fortresses. There's, like, one little spot where you're like, we might be okay if you're just a little around that Unicorn Gundam spot.
So let's end today, Sean, with our top 10 favorite Gundam names. I have a top 10, but then I also have an extremely long list of, like, honorable mentions. And I think we should give our 10 and then just end the episode reading random names.
Okay, that works for me, yeah. Because I have a very long list that's probably like 30-something names deep or something. Yes. I just listed so much shit.
All right. My number 10 favorite Gundam name from the original Gundam is Kukuru's Doan. He's got his own movie now to remind us of what a just wonderful name Kukuru's Doan is. And again, Kukuru's Doan's Island still sounds like it should be a kid's TV show where he invites you to his island and teaches you things.
It's a very good name, Kukuru's Doan. My number 10 from Stardust Memory, it's South Burning. This is like the, like, aged veteran or whatever that is, like, teaches Ko that was in the running for me of one of the best deaths, because he's the one who, like, at the end of the episode, his suit explodes from a malfunction that, like, there was, like, a nothing thing that slowly builds up over the course of the episode. But it's, like, I think maybe an underrated name in Gundam. South Burning. So good. Utter nonsense. Don't know how they came up with it, but man, South Burning, what a great name.
What a great name. One of my honorable mentions. My number 9, from the show that, by the way, has the most entries on my top 10, from Gundam 00, is Alleluia Haptism. / Hallelujah Haptism. What a fucking name.
Yeah, I had to really, like, focus in, and, like, I picked only one 00 name, because there was, like, it was either I do one of them or I do all of them. Because they're all very good for similar reasons, which is they're all these, like, very awful, amazing, like, Bible puns, basically. So, Hallelujah Haptism, like Hallelujah, which is his alter ego literally is just named, and Baptism, but with an H. It's so good.
It's perfect.
Very good. My number 9, this is one I did not know this character had a surname until I looked it up, and I just looked up lists of characters and saw this. It is Biscuit's grandma from Iron-Blooded Orphans. I knew her first name was Sakura. Turns out her full name is Sakura Pretzel. Sakura Pretzel, grandmother to Biscuit, Cookie, and what's the other one? Like Crisp or some shit.
Yes. Oh my god.
Sakura Pretzel.
I'm sorry I peeked the mic there. I did not know that, and whatever I was expecting, I was not expecting Sakura Pretzel.
It's really good, huh?
Yes, I think I freaked out my dog. Okay. Wow. That's great. My number 8 is Ribbons Allmark from Double O, because they named the villain of the show Ribbons.
It's a great fucking name. My number 8, this is my Double O name. This is my favorite, because all the Innovades, and we'll just run down all the Innovades. You might have some of the other ones on your list, too. All of them have great names, but by far, my favorite is Bring Stabity. I think the Stabity is supposed to be like stability, because again, all the other names are shit like a new returner and Alia Aptism and stuff like that. But for whatever reason, they thought it would be good to just shorten it to Bring Stabity. And it's a great name.
That sounds like the name of a Hideko Kojima game where you walk around stabbing people, and it's called Bring Stabity, like Death Stranding.
Bring Stabity, 100%, yeah. I think that was the working title for Metal Gear Solid 3. It was just Bring Stabity.
My number 7 is Seabook Arno, which is comfortably good enough, but this also includes his alter ego in Crossbow Gundam, Kincaid Now.
Yeah. I thought about Seabook Arno, because I'll say that most of my list is mostly I just did like top 10 names in that like the funniest ones. If I did like the coolest Gundam names that are also pretty ridiculous, Seabook Arno might be my favorite legit coolest Gundam name.
It's so good. I love naming JRPG characters Seabook. It is a really good name for like a Dragon Quest hero. And then he's named Kincaid Now. I mean, it's so good.
Yeah, it's an amazing name. My number 7, I've always loved this name. It's a great name from Victory Gundam. It's Junko Janko.
So good. I forgot about that one. I love it. My number 6, we're still in Double O, but we have to be because this character is named Lock-On Stratos, which is comfortably cool enough. But Lock-On Stratos' actual human name is Lyle DeLandy, and he has a brother named Neil. Yep. So it is Lyle and Neil Dealandy, or Dylandy, and then their code name is Lock-On Stratos. Fuck yeah.
It's a great name. My number 6, this is one that I didn't know about. It's like a weird background character in Zeta Gundam, but when I was looking up characters, this name popped out to me. I'm like, this is an amazing name. It's Capricorn Kakooler.
What?
It's Capricorn Kakooler.
What is that from?
It's Zeta Gundam. It's like a background character. It's just like he's like a Neo Zeon dude, and his name is Capricorn Kakooler.
That's very good. My number 5, because it is the most fun Gundam name to say, is Setsuna F Seiei. I don't know how I could make this list without Setsuna F Seiei.
It's particularly fun to try to do like a Miyano voice and just like a Setsuna F Seiei. He really
it's a name. That name. It's a name so good they say the full name every time.
Yes.
He is never Setsuna on that show. He is always Setsuna F Seiei.
It's fantastic. My number 5, one that I think you get almost desensitized to because he's a very major character in Unicorn Gundam, but it just is worth pointing out how fucking ridiculous this name is, and that's Full Frontal.
Yes.
Like, what the fuck? What were they thinking? Full Frontal. I get that probably they were like, oh, we saw there's like an English term called like Full Frontal Assault or something like that. But of course, any native English speaker sees that name and the first thing you think of is full frontal nudity. Like, there's nobody that's looking at Full Frontal and isn't thinking this like this guy's just naked or some shit. And it's just one of those beautiful miscommunications. There's going to be one other really beautiful miscommunication between how the Japanese audience might read that name and how the English audience is going to receive that name, and Full Frontal is a great example.
Well, speaking of the nether regions, Sean, we've got at number 4 for me, Quattro Bagina from Zeta Gundam.
Yep.
Char's alter ego that is just the katakana for vagina. It's Quattro Bagina.
That one has to be intentional, right? Like, Tomino 100% did that on purpose. Like, Full Frontal is an accident. That was a mistake. Quattro Vagina is him making a dirty joke. It has to be. I'm convinced.
It's like what's funny about that is if you Romanized it like you Romanized a lot of other names, he would just be Quattro Vagina.
Yes.
Right?
And there are some, like, Zeta video games that only released in Japan that have that in the menus, it's just Quattro Vagina. Because, as you say, that would be the pretty standard way of actually transliterating that in English.
Yes.
It's great.
It's fantastic.
My number 4 from Reconquista in G, it's everyone's favorite president of Ameria. It's Zucchini Nakini.
I have him a little higher. My number 3 is my boy from First Gundam, Job John. My beautiful blonde boy, Job John.
Job John is also, he's a little bit higher on my list, but yes, Job John is a classic. My number 3, in a similar category as Full Frontal. This is a name that in Japanese is very innocuous, but in English, I'm sorry, I know it makes me sound like a 5th grader, but I find it incredibly funny. From Gundam Age, it's Captain Anus. It's Captain Natola Anus. Captain Anus is not a character in, like, South Park. That is just straightforwardly the name of a character. In Gundam Age, you know, it's spelled E-I-N-U-S, but it is 100% just pronounced Captain Anus. She is the captain of the ship in Part 3 of Gundam Age. It's Captain Anus.
My number 2, this one very nearly overtook my perennial number 1, and that is Klimpton Nakini, a.k.a. Klim Nick, and his dad, Zucchini Nakini, that duo of Zucchini and Klimpton Nakini. Zucchini Nakini is just a fucking masterpiece. This was an easy number 2. I actually struggled with whether or not this would overtake and become my number 1. But Jesus Christ, Klimpton and Zucchini Nakini, wow.
Yeah, because I had, like, Klimpton Nakini in my head for a long time, and I had forgotten that his dad's name was Zucchini Nakini. Yes. Because, again, that one is my number 4, and it is amazing. My number 2, you just said it earlier, it's a classic, absolute classic. It's Job John from Original Gundam. Just perfect. It's such an unassuming name that on first brush seems like that's a totally reasonable, normal name. And then you look at it again, it's like, no, that's a crazy name. Who fucking named this dude Job John?
If I ever have a son, I am naming him Job John Lack, and I am going with him to the first day of school every year to make sure his teacher knows his name is not Job, it is not Job, it is Job John, and she or he will say it every day as Job John.
Exactly. It's the only thing in Job John, and hopefully they're, Job John's in a class with Capricorn Cooler.
My number 1, the best, the original, it is Ramba Ral and his father Jimba. They had a guy named Ramba Ral, and they named his father Jimba Ral.
Yeah.
Number 1.
My number 1 is like I'm giving it just straight up to Jimba Ral. Obviously, Ramba Ral is also an all-time great name, but Jimba eclipses it because it's the offhandedness with which Jimba happens, right? Because Jimba Ral is only mentioned one time in the original Mobile Suit Gundam in the episode Char and Sayla, where that's where you get all the flashback stuff that tells you sort of all the Zeon Zoom Daikun and all that backstory, and it so feels like Tomino or whoever else was having to come up with, like, writing those lines. If it wasn't him directly, they were like, well, it's who would be someone that would know this? Oh, Ramba Ral, we had that backstory. Okay, it's his dad. Ramba Ral. What's his dad? Ramba. Yeah, Jimba. And they just ran with it. They're like, Jimba. Jimba's a totally normal name. What do we replace Ram with? It's Jim. It's Jimba Ral. Just the most beautiful name in Gundam, and maybe the most beautiful name in all fiction. Jimba.
Sean, let's go through some honorable mentions. Frau Bo, all-time great name. Did you know her mother is named Fambo?
Yes, I did. I am aware of Fambo. It is on my honorable mentions. Fambo is amazing. Here's an honorable mention from me. I love this name from G-Reco. It's Relia Monday. Relia
Monday.
Oh, it's so good.
Well, while we're on G-Reco, let's go with Kumpa Rusita.
Kumpa Rusita is very good. I'll go with also G-Reco, Gel Trimodestus Nug. It's a good name.
Don't forget Manny Ambassador.
Yeah, Manny Ambassador is very good. Going off of G-Reco a little bit, this is one where it's less the name itself, which is still good, but it's also his nicknames. I want to shout out from Gundam Build Fighters. Niels Nielsen, also known as the Samurai Boy, also known as Early Genius, which is the best nickname. I wish people called me Early Genius.
Early Genius is fantastic. I'm going to turn to turn A, and I'm going to shout out my boy Gavin Gooney.
Gavin Gooney was on my list as well. Yeah, Gavin Gooney's great. A good turn A1 is Maribel Gadget.
That's a great one. Agrippa Maintainer is a major character in that show.
Oh, Agrippa Maintainer is fucking amazing. Here's because I'm just scrolling through my list. Here's one from 0083 that I didn't know about. Did you know that Nina's dad is named Peter? So his name is Peter Purpleton.
My God,
good old Peter
That's
Purpleton.
Great. I mean, while we're on family names, let's not forget that Bright Noah named his son Hathaway. Yes. Hathaway Noah, easy to take for granted, great name.
Well, Hathaway, even better is his little sister, Chameen Noah. I don't know what a Chameen is, but Chameen Noah is a classic.
And the man who was almost his daddy, Cameron Bloom. I love that name.
Cameron Bloom's, low-key great. I just want to run through a bunch of the other innovative names from 00 Gundam, because you had a couple of yours, like Alleluia Haptism. We also have, this is not an innovate, but this is like the most corny, like Bible-y sounding name, which is Felt Grace. You usually don't hear her last name, but her name is Felt Grace. You also have names like A New Returner. You've got Regine Regetta. You've got, of course, Bring Stabity. You've got Revive Revival, Divine Nova, and another personal favorite of mine, Healing Care.
Revive Revival has always been one of my favorites. That is fantastic. From the original Gundam, we all know General Revel, but I don't think we mention enough that his full name is Johann Ibrahim Revel. Because that is a fucking name for a great man.
That is a great name. Similar to Job John in Mobile Suit Gundam is, of course, Marker Clan.
And his friend Oscar Dublin.
Yes, it's for Oscar Dublin. And, of course, everybody's favorite American, lover of cheeseburgers the world over, it's Slugger Law.
Slugger Law, and I think another name that sounds very American is Lieutenant Woody Malden.
Just whenever you do Lieutenant Woody, it just makes you think of that dumb SD Gundam skit.
Yes.
Here's another one that was from Zeta Gundam, like Capricorn Cacooler, that I didn't know about, but when I was looking up characters, this name popped up. It's Manatee Mandana.
Manatee Mandana. That sounds like a children's character, like a mascot on a fucking children's show.
Manatee Mandana.
Sticking with original Gundam, never forget that the original White Base's captain was named Paolo Cassius.
Paolo Cassius.
That is a name.
And also, classic original Gundam name is everybody's favorite new type, Shalia Bull.
Shalia Bull. I don't want to forget Isolina Eskonbach. Because it's great.
Good. Let's see. There's some other good ones here that we haven't said yet. We've got Marbet Fingerhat from Victory Gundam.
You've got Meribit Stapleton from Iron-Blooded Orphans. Don't forget that one.
Yes. Oh, we mentioned his Gundam earlier, but of course, everybody's favorite American, Chibbity Crockett.
Chibbity Crockett, King of the Wild Frontier.
Yes.
From Victory Gundam, Fons Kagati.
Oh yeah, because he's like the weird dude with the monocle and all that shit. Right?
A monocle,
really
yes,
fucked up.
yes.
Yeah. I'm going to stick on my G Fighter train with another name I love so much is Alan B. Beardsley.
Alan B. Beardsley is fantastic. Going over to Zeta to do a villain, Jamatov Hyman.
Yep.
Again, right there with Quattro Bagina, yes. Jamatov Hyman.
It has to be intentional, right? They have to know. They have to know.
Yes.
We've got other. This is just just for me. Let's not forget that the Gundam fighter from London in G Gundam is Gentle Chapman.
Gentle Chapman. Yep, that's what we used to call you in high school, Sean.
Yep.
It was, we all saw Gentle Ben on TV as a kid, and we decided you were Gentle Chapman. We're not old enough to have seen Gentle Ben on TV. We talked about this character earlier, but I think it's worth not forgetting that this is a truly wonderful name. Gigi Andalusia.
Yes.
From Hathaway. I mean, come on.
It's a great name. Here's one from Gundam Wing. Gundam Wing doesn't have a lot of particularly good names, but there's one, and I have to say this one the way it's pronounced in Japanese because it's the thing that makes it, and that's Katoru de Baba Wina.
Fucking great. Yes.
Fucking great.
It's great. My favorite name to try to spell, because it's the worst spelling in all of English Gundam, and that is Makuve. Yes. They fucked that one up. That is one that I really just want to spell in katakana, but in English it makes no sense.
Yes. Let's see. Another really good one. This is After War Gundam X. I've always loved this name. There's Grits Joe.
Nice. Okay, this is my last big gun I have on the list, Sean. This is from Crossbone Gundam and it from the sequel series Steel 7. That's the second Crossbone Gundam series. There's a character named Twink Stella Labaradu. There is a Gundam character named Twink. It is derived from the katakana for twinkle, but there is a Gundam character named Twink Stella Labradu. Wow.
That's incredible. I don't think I ever knew about that one. And I'll finish off. This will be the last one that I offer. Is everyone's favorite Victory Gundam character? It's Carlman Ducatus. Good old Carlman the baby.
I didn't know that was his last name.
I didn't know that either. I just knew it was Carlman, and then I looked it up, and his name was Ducatus.
That's amazing. Gundam is wonderful, and we have damn near ranked all of it.
We have, Jonathan, talked a lot about a lot of Gundam for 3 years on this podcast.
And there is still more. Next week on the show, we will be reviewing the movie, fresh out of Japan. I got the Blu-ray in last week, of Mobile Suit Gundam Kukuru's Doan's Island, directed by Yoshikazu Yasuhiko. It is wonderful. We will be reviewing that next week. I'm very excited to talk about that one. And there will be another Gundam episode a week after that, because I am going to take the SD Gundam hour we did from our 10th anniversary Weekly Stuff podcast, and I will put that out as an official episode of Weekly Suit Gundam, so that can be in its proper place in the Weekly Suit Gundam pantheon. We reviewed all of the SD Gundam shorts. So you've got at least 2 more weeks of good Gundam chat coming. But then, we could keep stretching to try to just do Gundam stuff, or we could try to shift things a little bit. Sean, I think we've maybe decided on the latter.
Yeah, so obviously with year 3 of the podcast and this 30-year anniversary, we have effectively, with the exception of Kukuru's Doan's Island, which I think serves as a nice epilogue for the original kind of project of this podcast, we have reached the end of the project of Weekly Suit Gundam, in the sense that we have watched it all, and more Gundam will continue to come out, and obviously we will hit that when it comes out. But we don't want to stop Weekly Suit Gundam effectively just because we ran out of Gundam, and so we needed to figure out what to sort of pivot the podcast into. And I think after doing stuff like we did Kimetsu no Yaiba, and we did Jujutsu Kaisen, obviously we did stuff like Neon Genesis Evangelion, and doing other episodes on other anime has kind of reached us to the point where I think it makes the most sense if we're going to kind of pivot Weekly Suit Gundam and transform it into a bigger version of itself that is not limited purely to just Gundam, and is also not limited to mecha stuff. Instead, we're doing a full anime-focused podcast that will be in the style of Weekly Suit Gundam, in the sense that it'll be analytical, it'll be historical, we'll pick big topics and run through those topics in basically chronological order, do the kind of stuff we did on Weekly Suit Gundam, but open up the sort of chest to a much broader range of different topics. And we've been brainstorming and working on topics and stuff behind the scenes. And we can announce the name of this podcast that I'm very happy about is Japanimation Station.
Japanimation Station, which refers to a radio station, not a train station. Yes. I learned, because this was Sean's idea. I started putting logos together. My mind went to trains, because to me, trains are in a lot of anime. And Sean's like, no, I meant a radio station. And I'm like, that makes sense too.
Because it is a podcast.
You can, trains are still used. The radio is not. That's fair enough. Japanimation Station. We will be renaming the Weekly Suit Gundam YouTube channel Japanimation Station. But Weekly Suit Gundam is not ending. It will be a show on the Japanimation Station side. And whenever there is new Gundam, or a Gundam we want to come back to, we've always wanted to do a Crossbone Gundam episode. I'm sure we'll do that someday. We will add, and the numbering will continue on Weekly Suit Gundam. But there will be a second podcast on the channel called Japanimation Station. And the first show we're reviewing on that, I think we can announce, is Full Metal Alchemist. We will be doing the original anime, the original movie, and then the sequel, not the sequel anime, but the second anime that did the manga story, Brotherhood, because Sean recently read the manga, but has never seen these anime.
Yes.
And so we're actually going to be reversing the positionality a little bit, where I've been watching FMA my whole life, and Sean is going to be the newbie to the animes, at least, and I want to hear how the 2003 show blows his fucking mind, because he's only read the manga.
Yeah, and I think one thing that's exciting about this with Japanimation Station, because we've brainstormed a bunch of topics and stuff, and I think one thing that's fun about it as an extension of what we've done on Weekly Suit Gundam is that there is no topic I can come up with that does not in some meaningful way connect to Gundam in a like 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon-esque fashion, but it's like 1 degree of Gundam. Because, of course, the original Full Metal Alchemist anime was directed by the director of 00 Gundam. And, of course, the main character in Full Metal Alchemist is voiced by Lauren Sayak, right? In Turn 8 Gundam.
Roby Park, yeah.
So it's like and anything I've come up with, I'm like, oh no, I can think of this major voice actor that got their start, or oh, the composer is the same person, or this writer worked on this Gundam show. So I think one thing that will be fun about Japanimation Station is that we're taking like all the kind of institutional knowledge and things we've analyzed and history we've built up with Weekly Suit Gundam and taking that forward into like broader topics in other shows and other series. And some of them will be more tangentially connected to some of the stuff we've done with Gundam, and some of it will be very directly connected. Some of the future topics will be extensions of things we've done in directors and creators in the Gundam world.
I can tell you guys right now, one of the things we will be doing within the first year of Japanimation Station is our long-awaited Tomino-thon, where we will be watching all of Yoshiyuki Tomino's major works that are not from Gundam. Yeah. And that will be probably our first big season, because we want to do Full Metal Alchemist. We're probably, after Full Metal Alchemist, we've been talking about doing Fate Stay Night, and its UFO table adaptations. There's not too many of those, and so Tomino-a-thon might be the first big season we do. But these are all coming, and I think it's going to be really exciting and gives us a chance to talk about more anime. If you subscribe and are listening to this on YouTube, you don't need to do anything. It'll just, the channel name will change, but you will still get all the same content. If you're in a podcast app, there will eventually be a new feed for Japanimation Station, and that'll be separate from Weekly Suit Gundam, but it'll be easy to find, and we will let you know well in ahead of that. And it'll probably start in August.
Yeah, so I'm super excited about this and being able to talk about more stuff. But again, we do have more Weekly Suit Gundam in the immediate future because we've got a damn movie to watch, Jonathan.
A Kukuru's Doan movie.
A Kukuru's Doan's Island movie. I need to get more 15-year-old Amuro, and luckily they made a movie where I can get that.